All right, welcome everybody. How are you feeling today? Oh, come on, there's got to be a little bit more excitement in this room. How are you feeling today? It is time. Border 911 starts now. Now, let me just say this. I'm going to do the invocation. My name is Steve Montenegro. You're going to hear a little bit about me or from me a little later today. But we're going to start right now with our invocation. I'm going to lead us in an invocation to start. And then the color guard will be done by American Legion Post 79, Boy Scout Troop 41. And the national anthem is going to be done by Becca Wilborn. So please join me if you would stand with me, and let's go to our God. Heavenly Father, God of heaven and earth, we thank you. We honor you today. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet in this place for such an important issue. First of all, we thank you for every good gift, for every perfect gift, for the blessings of liberty that you have given us for this country, the greatest country on the face of the planet, the United States of America. We thank you for the men and women that at this moment are standing on those front lines of freedom so that we could gather in this place. We ask that you would be with them, cover them, protect them, keep them safe, and bring them home to us safe as well. We ask that you would be with us today as well as we dive into this serious matter that is in front of us in our country. Give us the wisdom to discuss these things, to come up with solutions, to inform ourselves so that we can make a difference, so that we can save this, our great nation. In everything we do, we want to make sure we honor you. So we ask for your protection today. We ask that you be with us and that you would be honored, as I said, in everything we do. In that mighty, mighty name of Jesus, we ask. Amen.
Color guard, attention. May the audience please rise. Scout, salute. Color guard, advance. Color guard, halt. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, indivisible. 2. Scout reform. Color guard, retreat. Color guard, halt. The audience may be seated.
We'll be singing the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
All right, you may be seated. Let's kick this off by me asking you a question. What is Border 911?
I've served my country for 34 years. And yes, I held a 5-year-old boy in my arms. I knelt down beside him and said a prayer for him because I knew what his last 30 minutes of his life was like. What I've been trying to do my 34 years serving my nation is to save lives. That's why this whole thing needs to be fixed.
If you think that this fentanyl crisis is going to get better because somehow the cartels are going to be concerned that there's so many Americans losing their lives, I want to be very clear, that is not going to happen. There is no one coming. They are going to have to be stopped.
This is Victor Avila. It is a disaster down there, especially in El Paso. I was just at the border a week and a half ago, and nothing has been done. Every time the White House says something like this, or Mayorkas continues to lie to the American public, it's an insult. It's a slap in the face to our border agents, to our HSI agents, ICE, DEA. They're being insulted by our own administration. Remember, it's not just the illegal immigrants that are coming in. It's the fentanyl, it's the methamphetamine, it's the national security threat of the terrorists. 116 of them have been detected and detained at the border. How many have infiltrated our country already? This is a national security crisis that we must wake up and pay attention.
This is the United States of America. It's supposed to be sovereign land. We're supposed to be able to control our own border. We don't control the border. The criminal cartels, the ones looking at us right now, they control this border. The strongest nation in the world no longer controls the southern border, which has resulted in historic illegal immigration, historic drug flow, historic sex trafficking of women and children. This can be stopped. We've done it before. We got to defend the border. We got to save lives.
You know, the sun is setting here behind us, and I think any reasonable and prudent American knows that what is happening has caused some dark times, but the sun will also rise, and with that, tough men are going to rise to the occasion. There is a dark winter coming for those who have hurt so many people. The question is, how long will it take before those men are able to do what needs to be done?
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Johnson. I'm co-founder of the America Project. It is our distinct honor to help put on this event. It wasn't us alone. The West of the Pecos Republican women, I have to acknowledge them here first, is that Steel Troop 41 that came for the to bring the colors here. The Granada Theatre, thank you very much. I just want to put that out up front. This is an amazing venue, and we're really excited to get started. So real quick about us, the America Project, we're a 501c4 nonprofit organization, and we have 3 pillars: election integrity, border security, and rights and freedoms. And that covers a lot if you think about it. We get that question a lot, what is it we do? And we try to focus. We can't do them all at once, but we do a lot with a very small and lean staff. So I'd like to thank my staff while I'm here too. And starting with Border 911, this is a series. There's going to be a lot of them. This is the second one. But it's a way to bring these issues here. Everybody here knows these issues that's from here. Everybody knows that Texas is the front line for the war to restore our nation's border and take serious national security issues. And that's what this tour is about. Again, I'm humbled to be a part of it. I'm humbled to have my team here be a part of it. And I will say another honor of mine is to welcome the three principals here, which are, I think, we've put together the best team to discuss every national security issue, ready with a border from top to bottom, from tactical to strategic. And you're going to hear from them a little bit. But this town hall, we're going to hear from you. So it's a very interactive town hall. We want to hear everything you have to say. And again, my pleasure for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce, it's Mr. Tom Homan, Jaeson Jones, and Victor Avila. So proud to have them here. I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you very much.
So we're going to start this thing off in a few minutes. I just want to talk for a few minutes. I'll hand over to my partners here. Look, I'm a busy guy, but I wake up every day pissed off because, you know, I started in Border Patrol in 1984. I spent 34 years trying to secure the border, trying to save lives. And you saw my testimony. These congressmen, they don't get it. There's a few up there that do. Guys like Chip Roy, he has the right ideas. But I wake up every day pissed off. So when I got contacted by this group, will you come and join us? We want to do this border 911. I didn't hesitate because we're going to go across the country and educate America on what's going on the border. Unless you're watching Fox News and Newsmax, you don't even know there's a border crisis. You guys know because you're dealing with it. And that's why we're here today to listen to your complaints. But Border 911 is going to be a strong program across the country to educate the American people on what happened to our southern border. And I don't care what their opinion is on illegal immigration, it's bigger than that now. When you create a crisis this big, that's taken 70, 80% of the agents off the line to process, change diapers, make baby formula, make hospital runs, make airport runs. When you do that, the criminal cartels take advantage of it. They'll send a group of 200 people through one area, knowing whatever left of the Border Patrol is on the line is going to seize that humanitarian issue, and they create gaps where they're going to move the fentanyl, where they're going to move the known suspected terrorists. Now, people say, how do you know known suspected terrorists? Well, let's put it this way. Border Patrol has arrested people from 170 different countries. Some of these countries are sponsors of terrorism. If you don't, and we've got 1.2 million recorded gotaways. That's not a guess. These are numbers that are counted, either on drone traffic, sensor traffic, camera traffic, 1.2 million known gotaways. How many got away we don't know about? Who the hell knows? There's a lot of parts of the border that don't have drones, don't have cameras, don't have aerostats. But we know 1.2 million. So 170 countries, 1.2 million gotaways. Some of these countries sponsor terrorism. If you don't think a single one of that 1.2 million people didn't cross the border to do us harm, then you're ignorant to the facts. The Border Patrol's arrested 156 of them. They've arrested 156 that try to sneak in the country illegally. That's why this project's so important. So I'm going to go across the country with this group and talk to American people. It just isn't about immigration anymore. It's about national security. It's about the fentanyl flow. It's not a coincidence in 2 years of historic illegal immigration that's taken the majority of agents off the line that we have historic fentanyl overdose deaths. The media, the Hill, likes to say they all come through the port of entry. It's bullshit. Most of it seized at a port of entry because they stop every car, they talk to every driver, then they make the decision based on his responses. Are we going to secondary him? Or they also got the CBP targeting system. I won't tell you what's in it. There's a few people in the audience that know what's in it. And they run that license plate, and the targeting system sometimes will tell them, this might be a vehicle you want to check. So, of course, most of the fentanyl seized at a port of entry. We don't know what's going on between the port of entry. And why I'm so pissed off, because under the Trump administration, whether you like President Trump or not, you can't argue with his success. Illegal immigration down 83%. 40-year low, 45-year low at some points. And when 83% less people are coming, how many women aren't being raped by the criminal cartels? How many Americans aren't dying of drug overdoses because fentanyl is not seeping through these open borders? How many known suspected terrorists aren't coming in the country? How many migrants aren't dying making this trip when 83% less coming? If you take 83% of the cars off the highway, would there be less highway deaths? Of course. It's simple math. So the reason I'm so pissed off, because we had a secure border. The most secure border I've seen in my lifetime. I've worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. Every president I had the honor to work with, I respect them all. Clinton, Obama, didn't agree with them, but they even took steps to secure the border because they understood you can't have national security without border security. President Biden's the first president in history of this nation who came into office and unsecured a border. Fact. He had over 200 briefings before on the transition between the handoff from one administration and the other, over 200 briefings where they were told, if you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this will happen. And they ignored it. And they opened the border up anyways. Secretary Mayorkas lies to the American people every day saying the border is secure. He needs to be impeached. So I'm going to walk around the country with these men here and in this organization and educate the American people on why the border is a disaster, why we have a record number of Americans dying, why you have over 1,700 migrants that have died on U.S. soil since he's taken office, record of smuggling, of trafficking of women and children, a record number of Americans dying, a record number of migrants dying, a record amount of drug flow. You should be pissed off too. So we're going to educate the American people. I'm proud to stand with TAP. I'm a busy guy. But this is important. And what we're here today is hear your stories. We're recording this today, so please, if anybody speaks today has a problem being on our website and being pushed out, please let us know. But we want the American people to hear some of your stories. They hear from guys like me and Fox and my partner here on Newsmax all the time, but they don't hear from you. We want them to hear from you today. So please, don't be bashful. Speak up and let us know your story. We want to know your story. Fox News tonight at 9 o'clock, I'll be live from Alpine with Lawrence Jones, and I'm hoping to talk about this. Of course, I don't pick the subject. They may pick some other subject, but I heard you had internet here, so I'm actually going to do a hit from here. So I'll be seeing you around here today. Please come up and say hi to me. But I wanted to explain to you real quick why did Tom Homan get involved? That's why. I'll let these 2 men tell their own stories, but please participate today. Our country's in trouble. What's going on our southern border. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime, and I've done this for 35 years. It's a disaster. It's a national security issue. Immigration, that's in the back seat now. All right, folks, so I'll introduce Mr. Jaeson Jones, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things I want to say here is that exactly what Tom just said. You know, most of Americans across the country hear about this border issue and have heard about it for the last 20 plus years through the lens of immigration. And what he said is absolutely right, that this is no longer just an immigration issue. Now, don't get me wrong. The immigration issue is directly impacting Americans all over this country, and it's very important. But it is one piece of a multi-layered problem that we are dealing with. And I will tell you, as somebody that knows and has built programs to go after these cartels, what we are really witnessing is the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. And I want to stress this again. The largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. There is not a terrorist organization in the world that is responsible for killing over 100,000 Americans, not just in 2021, but now the latest data that just came out a little over a week ago that 106,000 Americans lost their lives in 2022. We've never been here. So when you hear that this is truly, that these cartels represent the most significant national security and public safety threat to the American people, the data validates it. It's not a perception and it's not a feeling. In 2014, I was a captain in the Border Security Operations Center for the Texas Rangers. And I get a call from my major, and she says, "Jaeson, where is all the cocaine?" I didn't quite know where she was going with that. And I said, "Major, what are we talking about?" She said, "Look at our statistics. Our seizures of the highway patrol are down over 50%. So immediately I thought there was probably a policy change that had gone awry. And what I found is I reached out to the U.S. intelligence agencies with who we had been working with and with folks in the Reagan building of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And I said, "Where is all the cocaine?" And they said, "Jaeson, it is going overseas." What we are seeing is something we've not seen previously, and that is that in Russia right now, the price of a kilo of cocaine is about $100,000 from the Mexican cartels. In Australia, approximately $180,000. Think of that. Now, at the southwest border, I could buy a kilo of cocaine for $9,500 at the time. And in Europe, anywhere from about $90,000 to $100,000. And what had happened was a transition, that these cartels, specifically at the time, Cartel Jalisco New Generation, known as CJ&G, which was a rising new cartel, had then begun to ship their product globally. And this is how the rise of Cartel Jalisco New Generation came to what they are today. And what we have seen and what the American people have not been told is, how did we get here? How did we get to where we are? And that's because in 2006, the Calderon administration began using their military to go after the cartels. Prior to that, they were truly organized crime. You were going to do a dope deal at 9 o'clock, you're what we call doper time. And that deal wouldn't go till 2 o'clock. But what happened was the Los Zetas came in and they brought tradecraft and discipline. These were highly trained special forces members. And this is why the military began being utilized against these cartels, because now what we were witnessing, we were stunned. We were having, in 2006 to 2009, major gun battles involving everything from light anti-tank weapons, RPGs, 50 caliber belt-fed machine guns, hand grenades, 40mm grenades, 8 to 10 hours on your border. And yet the world had no idea what we were dealing with. As these cartels truly fought back against the Mexican government, this was the insurgency, because this is where the government of Mexico was truly going after them. And you heard from everyone at the time, you don't use your military. But what no one really understood and what was not being communicated was the sheer level of capability that they had. Now fast forward to 2009, as we began to see the evolution into terrorism. This is where you may remember the 72 migrants killed in San Fernando by the Los Zetas. You may remember the Allende massacre of 300 men, women, and children killed, cut into pieces, and guisoed, meaning they cooked them, because the cartels have a saying, you can't count a body that doesn't exist. And we were working all of this, and yet no one was telling the American people. And I am in the intelligence agencies. I'm going to the Reagan building. I'm going to DHS leadership, and I'm saying, we've got problems. And they're saying to me, "Jaeson, we hear you, but as long as that shit stays in Mexico." And this is what I was told for years. Today, where we see the cartels, ladies and gentlemen, is a true parallel government in Mexico. From 2015 on, look at the recent arrest of Ovidio Guzman as you saw the city of Culiacan truly erupt. So as I sit here with you today, if you are wondering how we have lost so many Americans, there are many layers to this, but what I can tell you is this, is that this is absolutely fixable. Don't let anyone tell you who have not dealt with these cartels that we cannot absolutely get rid of them, because I'm telling you, not only can we, but we will. In 2016, when I retired, I began trying to get these cartels designated as foreign terrorist organizations, because that's exactly what they are. And we will get this done. We will get tools of national authority and national power so that we can leverage them globally and work with people all over the world to truly crush them. And I want to say one thing here before I close. There are families in this country that I have spoke to and interviewed from Washington, D.C. to Nebraska to Arizona, throughout Texas, who feel absolutely abandoned. These angel moms and dads, my thoughts and prayers are with you, and I want to tell you, you are not forgotten. It's the common theme, I'm told, as I interview these families, that their government forgot them. And I want them to all know, as you're watching here today, for those of you that are here, you are not forgotten. And for these cartels, for what they have done to so many Americans, what they have done to so many Mexican citizens and to so many migrants, we are coming for you. You've got 2 years, and when we designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, we are going to unite with the world's best, and we are going to fix this. Thank you all for having me. I look forward to today.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Tom. It's my honor always to stand next to these gentlemen, these experts, these border security experts. And, you know, with the America Project, what we're trying to do is not only educate the rest of the country, because you guys here in Alpine, Texas are very aware of what's going on. You live it every day. But people still do not know what is happening. This morning, there was a Border Patrol-involved shooting in Maverick County. Did you guys hear about that? They tried to run over a Border Patrol agent. He was able to discharge his weapon and shoot the driver, a female driver, because these load vehicles of illegal aliens that's happening on a daily basis, these bailouts, the smuggling. Not everyone that comes into this country is trained themselves in. They don't want to. Why? You could walk up to a Border Patrol agent and turn yourself in and get processed, right? Well, that processing is not a real vetting. And we really do not have the capabilities because, like Tom Homan said, 70 to 80% of the agents are not on the line. They don't have the time to truly vet these individuals to see who they are and what the true intentions are. And what are they going to do in our country? We have to absorb them into our communities. So we see the bailouts, we see the smuggling, we see them in the back of tractor trailers. You got to remember, the cartels see the human beings like this podium here. It's a product. How many chairs can they put in the back of a tractor trailers? That's exactly how they see human bodies. They will transport them, move them, because they see dollar signs. And that's one of the shifts that Jason was talking about. The cartels have taken over the human smuggling and human trafficking, something that when I worked the border as a special agent, you know, the drug cartels were the drug cartels. And they did that. Not anymore. They control every aspect of the movement of illicit goods and people on the border. In Tempe, Arizona, a couple of days ago, there's a huge operation by DEA and took down millions of pills, of fentanyl pills, millions. And it's great seizures. But my experience working narcotics on the border, when we started seeing the high seizures being taken down, we knew that we were getting, you know what, handed to us. It's not a good thing when you see these high seizures happening. It's a good thing we take them off the streets. That's good. But that means that a lot of it is coming through this poison, killing our youth. And yes, we talk a lot with the America Project. We're in touch with the angel moms, the families that have lost their loved ones at a poisonous pill, a counterfeit pill. According to DEA, 6 out of 10 pills in this country is counterfeit right now. You're playing Russian roulette. You got to talk to your kids. You got to let them know this is a new ball game here. The cartels are functioning in Mexico through the help of who? China. China, Venezuela. Who was in Mexico last week? The president of Cuba. Welcome with open arms. Right next door, not 6,000 miles away. These are communist countries right next to us, infiltrating us, buying our land, sending balloons. Wait till you see the Chinese nationals coming over next month. There's thousands of them in South America already. They started showing up in the Texas border. You will see them here in Alpine, Texas. Are we vetting these individuals? Do we know what they want? What are they going to do in our country? Listen, we're compassionate people. We're humanitarian people. But we don't want the women and the children to continue to be raped because the Biden administration tells them that the border is open along with Mayorkas, because that's what they're putting them through. The UN in South America is handing out female condoms and the morning after pill to every female, not to see if you're going to get raped, it's to see how many times you're going to get raped to avoid pregnancy. This is what the Biden administration has done to these individuals. The men get raped, they get beaten, they get extorted, they get robbed. But we must seal the border, because if you save that border, you seal that border, you control that border, you actually save lives. You actually defend lives. So at the America Project, we don't like to just beat the dead horse and tell you about the problem. We're very focused on solutions. We want to hear from you today. And we also work a lot with our elected officials, because yes, you cannot ignore this political atmosphere, right? It's like this. We must hold our elected officials accountable. We must put the pressure on at every level, here in Alpine, locally, state, federal, to look out for the best interests of our United States of Americans and our citizens. And today we look forward to hearing more from you guys, and we're going to tell you about what we're doing and share those solutions with you. Thank you so much, Alpine, for showing us today. Thank you.
I'm going to try to do this without hardly being able to see my slides or seeing them through the screen here. So we'll do the best we can. I don't have a clicker. My name is Keith Rose, and I'm not really sure why they asked me to come here. I guess they needed someone to talk. But it was really nice last night, those of you I got to meet and sit at a table and listen to you talk. And the most common question I got was, is it hopeless, and what can I do? So in the next 20 so minutes, I'm going to try to explain how it's really bad, but there is something you can do. You know, borders, you got to define them. We have an administration today that doesn't want to define anything, and I know I'm supposed to define who I am. You guys are probably wondering who this chucklehead is. I worked in most three-letter agencies for the past 20 years, and post 9/11, it changed my life. And I understood a lot about borders because as a young boy, I traveled a lot with my parents all over the Middle East. And during the Israeli war, we jumped a lot of borders. And I heard a man say one time, borders are where the bad ideas stop and good ideas start. Or vice versa, like in America where the good ideas start and you want to keep the bad ideas from coming in. Next slide. So everyone's life changed after 9/11. And I loved what Jaeson said about this being the largest intelligence failure since 9/11. And the tragedy is we have the largest intelligence failure since 9/11 because we didn't learn anything from 9/11. We had a subversion in our administration, in our bureaucrats, in the government workers, in the certain agencies that were redefining good and bad. And good judgment comes from experience. And you've heard it said, experience comes from bad judgment. And the one thing, I think the biggest tragedy that no one points out is our intelligence agencies, of which I was a part, didn't learn anything or the leadership didn't, from 9/11. Next slide. It changed my life, though. I went from surfing a lot and hanging out to being recruited in the intelligence services and traveling all over the world. I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, which is a cool garden spot, and even on the water. And the waters have borders and rules and lines too. Next slide. Next slide. I'm going to run through these quick. This is a slide of 9/11, and if you can read it on the bottom, I'm going to talk loud. It says, this heavy slap on their day, on their dark faces. Next slide. Policies are not our doing. This is Alpine's propaganda week. They were blaming 9/11 on our policies. It wasn't their doing. See, they weren't taking blame for it. This is one of their recruiting sites. Next slide. Now, this is how I look at the FBI and the CIA right now. And this is about the kindest slide I could show you of them. But we have to understand something. We've had a failure in our national intelligence services, period, full stop. And in most normal companies, when people fail, you would eject the people that caused the failure or educate them and work to have success. But it doesn't seem like we're doing that. I know Jaeson knows this. Anyone that's been in the military on high-speed teams, working in the intelligence services downrange, all great organizations, all great groups are built on lessons learned. And we're not learning the lessons that we need to keep this country safe. Next slide. That sums up what's going on in our country today. And you want to know how you can make a difference, you have to start speaking the truth. Because you're dealing, not to get in the weeds, with the cultural Marxist subversion in our nation. But the kryptonite to that is the truth. Next slide. I'll go through these real fast. I was working in Oman, and I happened to come across an arms bazaar when I just went to hang out in a village 5 miles from the Emirati border, the UAE. And when I did that, I noticed this arms bazaar. I was just going to get some fruit and hang out. I was on my off time. I put it into central reporting. I guess it made it to the right people. Next slide. And so it went from, this is the border of Oman and the UAE. Next slide. And this is the border 45 days after I put my report in. Because they have a leadership in the UAE. It's a benevolent dictatorship. And when Sheikh Mohammed said, put up a fence, they put up a damn fence in 45 days. They knew there was a threat across their border, and they protected it. So when people tell you we can't do it or it costs too much money, they're lying. A good example of the way they lie, does anyone understand what's going on in Ukraine? You know we've given Ukraine over $100 billion? Now, $100 billion sounds, can't really rationalize or understand that, because the government loves to throw out content without context. Let me put it in context for you. The largest spend we had in Afghanistan and Iraq during the peak of the wars, when we had major bases, full intelligence operations, all the special operations community involved, all the logistics, everything, 1 year budget, $47 billion. Now we've given $100 billion to Ukraine, and we don't have any official boots on the ground there. Notice I said official. But the problem is, where does that money go? Again, not to get in the weeds, but it comes from these big bills of spending, comes back through nonprofit groups. And while we are, quote, helping them secure borders, they're putting that money into unsecuring our border. Next slide. This is a very secure border. Does anyone know where this is? Tom might know. This is Israel. This is a place I used to go and hang out. This is the wall up near Bethlehem, separating the Palestinians from the Israelis. It used to not be there. When I was a kid, you could just walk in there. Now you have to go through a real big security checkpoint. But there's a reason for this. Next slide. This is what happens in Israel when people get across. Next slide. This is what they have to deal with. Next slide. Every day. Next. They can have attacks on their citizens, next, because it's important to them. They don't want to be attacked. They have to protect their citizens. See, that's what the government should be doing. It should be protecting its sovereign border. Now our government knows how to protect a border. These fences were put up in less than 12 hours after January 6th because the politicians were very, very afraid something would happen. I would put to you, they weren't afraid that they would be attacked by the January 6th people. I think they were afraid people would understand what actually happened prior to January 6th. But they knew how to put it up. Next. They knew how to protect themselves. Now, again, President Trump came in and kind of ruined their plan, really set it back. And on his second day in office, President Trump came in, he put into the executive order that helped stop child sex trafficking, a border issue. And when President Biden came in, on his second day, his first executive order was to rescind Trump's executive order on child sex trafficking. Next slide. We're going to go through this fast, but I'll explain to you in 2 minutes why. This is the front page of the Guatemalan newspaper from 2014, November, with President Biden in Guatemala telling everyone at a conference that the border was open for minors in the United States. Next. This is the article that they scrubbed from the internet. I just happened to keep it, where he's telling everyone the borders are open for minors. Next slide. At the same time, and I'm not going to go into the weeds here, next slide, there's a group called CICIG. It's an anti-corruption measure put on by a Soros front group, and the bottom line was it took control of the judiciary and developed what they called humanitarian groups, but were in actuality militias. So that we were using taxpayer dollars to put judges in place to allow criminals to go free, to build up militias similar to Antifa down in Central America, much more violent. Next slide. Here's Biden bragging about being able to help CICIG on Twitter, helping them keep these front judges in place, just like he did in Ukraine. It was the same thing, but this affects our border. Next. Keep going. I went down in 2016, 2017. I was badged by the World Health. That was my cover for status, so they were good for something back then. And we went to collect bodies after a volcano erupted in Guatemala. I'm going to give you the long story short in 20 seconds. One of these militia groups, during the Trump administration, was formed to come north into the United States. But because of President Trump and his aggressive stance on the border, and guys like Tom Homan, they backed Mexico down, and Mexico was turning away these mass caravans before they even entered Mexico. So when this caravan got to the Mexican border, they were turned around and became Guatemala's problem. Guatemala, next slide, put them in an old town that had been, no one was living there, and then a volcano that hadn't erupted in almost 100 years erupted and wiped out everybody in this town. Next. And so while we were there recovering bodies, I got to see the evidence and why they locked down the place, because they had to get the weapons of this group out first. We talked to the people and found out how there were subversives in the Trump State Department that actually put this militia group together. But because of President Trump, this is kind of one of his unsung victories. You know, it pushed these people back and unfortunately killed 2,500 people. Next slide. Keep going. Now, this is in Iraq. This is Erbil. And it says, you know, welcome, please turn your watch back 2,000 years. They made fun of the jihadists a lot. But their borders mattered too. Next. And the reason their borders mattered, I'm here with the Kurds on the border. We were fighting ISIS. And we were there for a reason. Next. Because they had chemical weapons. Now, at the time when all this was going on, President Obama was saying there was no Islamic terror. And this is one of the most critical points you need to understand. In 2011, the Obama administration changed a lot of the way we do things in intelligence. When you put together a report to protect this nation, when you're doing strategic intelligence and analysis, you have to be able to identify what you're dealing with. And we had to use the word Islamic terror. But suddenly in the CTC manual, you weren't allowed to use it anymore. They moved a bucket for Islamic terror to such a narrow meaning, and they expanded the bucket for domestic terror, where the money would go. And because they did that, in fact, a good friend of mine, Rich Higgins, was working at the NSC, and him and his group identified an Islamic terrorist here in the United States that was in our military at Fort Hood. And it wasn't Hassan, this is after his attack. And they went and they created a report, and this guy's name was Nasir Abdo. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's currently serving life in prison, not because of the intelligence services, because when Rich Higgins, who was an American hero, when they identified this guy, they were told they were xenophobic and racist at the NSC, and they would not investigate this guy. But this is the key point. He was caught, not by us, but by the gun owner of a gun store owner who was paying attention and reported him to the authorities, and we didn't have another mass casualty event at Fort Hood. This former private is now in prison for the rest of his life. But he was stopped by someone paying attention, not part of the machine. Next slide. This is just to show you how ISIS can be on the battlefield 1 second and be in South America the next. Next slide. We were dealing with chemical weapons there, and don't kid yourself, they're easy to transport. And with an open border, anything can come across. Next slide. These are more of their chemical weapons. Next slide. This is a shorter talk, so I'm going to, next slide. I think this is important. This is right on the border of Mexico and the U.S., in Texas. This is in Reynosa. These guys, and Jaeson can really probably speak to this, Jaeson, they traveled from Monterrey to Reynosa through all cartel territory in a brand new SUV, and nothing happened to them. They made it there with their car and their money intact. Can you imagine? More interestingly, next slide, they're from Ukraine. National police officers from Ukraine, smuggled by the cartel and crossing our border. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, back up one. I'm sorry, if you can. Is that possible? You see that lady there on your right? She's a congressional staffer for a California Democratic congressman back in, I believe this is 2017. tax dollars, she was down in Mexico helping people cross. They were putting congressional staffers down in Mexico helping people cross. They were giving them, they were telling them that when they get across, it was 100 degrees this time. They were putting them in sweaters, telling them they were going to be put in coolers, that President Trump was going to put them in a cooler, so they had them all wearing sweaters, and telling them to vote Democrat. They're already encouraging these folks as they're crossing the border. Next slide. I'll end with this. We all know what's going on. We all know how bad it is. But a lot of us are wondering, I got asked this question last night, why is it so bad? Are the liberals, are the Democrats just trying to get more voters? And I think there's some truth to that. But I've found out chasing terrorists all over the world that it always comes back to money. Every major terrorist network is basically just a different version of the Sopranos. And this is where it gets super interesting. You probably have heard this. We recently had this gentleman right here on your left, McGonigal. He's an ex-FBI official. He was just indicted. And they were talking about how he worked with the Russians and their proxy with the Russian oligarchs. But again, when the media tells you something, in the intelligence world, always look for what they're not telling you. So I read the indictment. And that's there, but there's something more important there. This guy also worked with
doubling of tourism from major Spanish speakers into Albania. Some English speakers. And I don't know about you, but Albania's never been on the top of my travel. It's not like Italy, Hawaii, Albania. But it had a major uptick in tourism. And then if you follow Euronews' thread, it goes over the Sinaloa cartel has now allied with the Albanian mafia. And that is from the Mexican media. So you have the Sinaloa cartel aligning with the Albanian mafia, which has now normalized relations with China, where you can travel without a visa next slide. Well, then it gets more interesting because the Sinaloa cartel is the largest transporter of fentanyl into our country. China is the greatest producer of precursors for fentanyl. And the question is not what is happening, but how it's happening. Well, China, using the Albanian mafia, and this is all behind the scenes, is moving fentanyl to Mexico. But getting that amount of fentanyl across the board, because if you ask anyone, heroin is yesterday's drug. It's all fentanyl now. That amount of fentanyl doesn't come across in small packs. It comes across in semi-trucks within the border. Now, we can speculate that the bodies might have something to do with that in their administration, or you can understand the other articles that we have. CEFC, the Chinese energy company, brokered the deal between China and Albania. It's also the same energy company that's on record as claiming the bodies. When I started in intelligence, my boss told me one thing. He said, I'm going to give you two things you never do. One, never do anything you know is morally unconscionable. You can't do it. And the other one was not if, but when the American people find out what you've done, it doesn't shock the conscience of the nation. We look at the illegal immigration, and it's a tragedy, and it bugs us, and we all get upset. And the Biden administration, they can ride that propaganda through. But if you understand, Jaeson talked about this earlier, the hundreds of thousands of deaths we have currently in America from fentanyl, directly tied to a president who is receiving money from the same Chinese company that normalized relations to help broker that with Albania. It's moving fentanyl, most likely under the Sinaloa cartel, and it's all connected. Then you see it's a billion-dollar business, and the borders are being kept open, and our military and our intelligence agencies and our border patrol are being hobbled by an administration where the top people are making billions. And it makes a little more sense, and I believe that would shock the conscience of the American people themselves. So in the end, here's what you're going to deal with. You got to do something. You got to step out, and you got to make a difference. Because right now, a lot of you feel like you're insurgents in your own homeland. And that's okay. But realize not everything here is something that you would think is kinetic, is terrorism. A lot of it is just how we got here, and it's subversion. When I walked here to breakfast this morning, I walked past a bookstore, and on the front of that bookstore is the 1619 Project. Revisionist History, CRT. It's 30 yards outside your front door. That kind of subversion is training the future leaders in all the groups and agencies. And the way you defeat it is you get involved at a local level, you deal with it, and you get back in the fight for everyone. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you for coming this morning. We really appreciate you being here. According to a report by the nonprofit Families Against Fentanyl, the number of Americans being killed each month in fentanyl-related deaths is equivalent to nearly 2 9/11s each month. Well, I want to personally thank you for being here today. And I want you to know, first of all, my name's Steve Montenegro. I am a legislator, a state representative in Arizona, and I've served in the House and in the Senate. First of all, I recognize the reason we're here today is for you. This is a town hall. Border 911 is a town hall to hear how this issue is impacting you on the ground. The reason I'm here, they've asked me to speak a little bit of how we as legislators are teaming up with the America Project on initiatives like Border 911 and how we need to step up and do something at the state level. First of all, let me tell you a little bit briefly about myself. I'm only going to take a few minutes so that you can see what's being done across the country at the legislative level, some of the efforts that are happening and some of the solutions that we're trying to implement. But just to tell you a little bit about myself, first of all, I am an immigrant myself. My family immigrated when I was 5 years old legally to this amazing country from El Salvador. Thank you. I say that because it helps explain, a lot of people, they're confused perhaps as to how someone like myself can take such a hard stance against illegal immigration or against a porous open border. And the fact is that I tell folks, from the moment we entered into this country, my father and my mother have always taught me this is the greatest country on the face of the planet because of what we stand for. Because of the Constitution that our founders handed over to generation after generation, because of the belief that our rights come from our Creator, right? No government, no state gives us our rights, but our Creator has endowed us with certain unalienable rights. And I've always grown up with that understanding. My dad used to tell me when I was a young kid, Steve, he used to tell me, you look at what the American engineering mind has done in the middle of the desert. I live in the western part of the Phoenix metropolitan area. Look at what the American engineering mind has done. This is the greatest country on the face of the planet. He used to tell me, it is impossible to go hungry in this country. It is impossible. He looked at me and said, Steve, they sell rocks in this country. They sell rocks in this country. In Arizona, I kid around because in Arizona there is we pay landscapers to make our backyards look like a desert landscape. Only in this country. I just paid an amount of money that I shouldn't have to have dirt delivered for my backyard so that I can put in a planter in the back wall. I paid for dirt in this country. But we're losing that. That American dream that is for individuals not just like myself, but families like yours, your children who have been here perhaps longer, or also come from immigrant families. We're losing that because we have abdicated our responsibility as a people, right? And so when this calling steps up and asks someone like Steve, you've got to serve, you've got to step up, you've got to do something. How can I stand by and not do something? I tell folks, right now in El Salvador, where I was born, there is a 41-year-old man in a cornfield somewhere, working really hard. And I could easily have been there, and he could be here.
Has to follow the law. All right? Federal law requires the Biden administration to secure the border. And if you look at the language, it says shall. It's not an option of whether he gets to choose on whether to secure the border. He must do it. All right? So the question posed before the court is, does the Biden administration actually have to follow federal law? Yes or no? Do we have a king who can just blatantly ignore federal law? If the answer is yes, then we move to the second count, which is a writ of mandamus. A writ of mandamus seeks a court order to force or to compel a government official to discharge a duty that is owed by law. In other words, do your job. All right, if the Biden administration has to follow the law, then we want a court order in every single jurisdiction in which we have filed to force him to follow the law. If you look at this map, This is a map of the federal courts. So the Supreme Court is the only court that can adjudicate a legal issue for the entire nation. Down below that, you have the circuit courts of appeal. Below that, you have the district courts. So the dotted lines show the district courts. That's the trial court. We have filed in every single jurisdiction that is on the United States and Mexico border. We have every single inch of the U.S.-Mexico border hemmed up in a federal lawsuit. That is the Southern District of California, the District of Arizona, the District of New Mexico, and the Western and Southern Districts of Texas. So we're in Brownsville, San Antonio, Albuquerque, Phoenix, and San Diego. And what we are trying to do is to get an order to shut down the lawlessness. And you know what? We don't think that's too much to ask. We don't think it's too much to ask for our president to follow current law. Yet that's where we are as a nation. We are in a position where we have to sue our own government to try to get our own government to follow the law. That's what we do at the America Project. We are filing lawsuits, trying to make a difference. We have legislative efforts. We have boots on the ground. We're also filing lawsuits. So that, in a nutshell, is the border security lawsuits that we have. And I want to bring up one other thing. We may have actually, these lawsuits are powerful in that we have witnesses. We have witnesses who have signed affidavits, both immigrants who have come across the border without a visa. They are testifying as to what's going on. We have whistleblowers in the agency, in the Border Patrol, who are testifying as to what is going on. And you know what? Their testimony matches. And when you have matching testimony, that's corroborating evidence that the Biden administration is in fact failing or refusing to follow federal law. Well, you know what? We've had enough of that. We've had enough of that, and so we filed lawsuits. So we ask that you support us. We ask that you give our clients and our witnesses and everyone involved support, pray for them. The next person that is coming up is Mr. Nelson Barnes. Mr. Nelson Barnes is the project director for the Border Prosecution Unit at Operation Lone Star. He's also an assistant district attorney. He's someone else who is fighting back against the lawlessness. And so it's my honor to turn that over to him.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am with the Border Prosecution Unit, and this morning I want to tell you about what the Border Prosecution Unit is and a little bit about what is going on with Operation Lone Star and what efforts we're making to try and at least deter some of the activity along and in the border regions. If we could go to the next slide, please. I am here on behalf of my boss, Tanya Allschweed, who is the district attorney in the 452nd Judicial District. She is the elected chair of the Border Prosecution Unit Board. The Border Prosecution Unit, if we can move to the next slide. This is what BPU is. We were formed in 2009. We are a trusted activity of the governor's office. As you can see, there's 17 district attorneys' offices involved and 48 counties. We also have 6, you'll see on the map, well, that's not in the border region, that's Lubbock. Well, we've talked about it's everywhere, but those notes are Texas anti-gang centers, and they fall under our BPU auspices as well. If we'll go to the next slide, please. As I said, we were formed in 2009. We started with 7 lawyers that were embedded with the Department of Public Safety. Their purpose was to do major criminal activity cases, organized crime, conspiracies, the kind of cases that most local prosecutors don't have the time amidst their day-to-day to work on long-term. And we started that to work regionally. It has expanded. In 2015, we became in the government code as a set thing, so we are a line item in the budget. We are governed through the grant section of the governor's office. So every 2 years, we get to find out whether we keep to get going or not. And as I said, 17 offices, 48 counties, 6 tags. These grants are done locally. So the employees of BPU don't work for BPU. They work for your local district attorneys. And they're then funded via a grant mechanism. But we fund 43 attorneys, a dozen plus investigators, support staff, and then when Operation Lone Star came into being, we got 14 more attorney slots. And those work from regional attorneys that are in DPS offices to regular line prosecutors in DA's offices who work on border crime. And that is their job. That is their specific region, is to work on what crimes work on the border. We provide grants for equipment, for supplies. All of those things come from the governor's office to aid in the impacted areas of the border because they have more crime usually than typically what a county of that size might see. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what do we include? And what is Operation Lone Star? Operation Lone Star is Governor Abbott's initiative from the spring of 2021 to bring increased law enforcement presence, Texas Military Department presence, and increased prosecutorial support into the border regions. One of those included, so we are looking to fight smuggling. We are looking to fight drug trafficking. We're looking to fight human trafficking. Anything that is related to the border falls under Operation Lone Star. It is an initiative of funding and manpower and support and direction. We also have included, when I told you how we started to work on big crime, BPU was never part of the misdemeanors in the state. We didn't have county attorney participation in those cases, but with the growth of Lone Star, we have had to get into the misdemeanor business because we begin with the Criminal Trespass Initiative, which is the program to arrest those folks who are crossing property. And I'm going to get in a little more detail about that. We also see evading arrest in these issues, and we see resisting arrest. Next slide, please. Oh, I can talk about it. Oh, here we go. This is from my colleagues at the Department of Public Safety. They rolled this out at a training we had earlier this week. You can see the numbers since Lone Star started in the spring of 21, the number of arrests, the number of pounds of marijuana, the pounds of fentanyl that have been seized by the department. We also include some statewide numbers for their activities because that is related. It didn't start in Dallas. It got found in Dallas. So we have worked all of that, and you can see those numbers. We could go to the next slide, please. All right. Ongoing concerns in our Criminal Trespass Initiative. If we could flip next, please. All right. What is the Criminal Trespass Initiative? Presently, it is ongoing in 7 counties. We started in Kinney County, which is Brackettville. We then moved to Jim Hogg. Or we started in Valverde, I'm sorry. Then Kinney, then Jim Hogg, then Maverick, then Webb, then Zapata, and then most recently in Uvalde. With permission of landowners and with their consent, the Department of Public Safety places brush teams out in the brush at night and during the day to arrest folks who are undocumented and U.S. citizens who are criminally trespassing on that property. We have arrested almost 6,000 people for criminal trespass and prosecuted them. The big hunk of that, thank you. It's a lot of hard work from a lot of people outside of me, I can tell you that. The brush teams work regionally. We have the Uvalde, Kinney, Maverick, Valverde brush teams, and then our southern area with the Webb, Zapata, and Jim Hogg brush teams. Think about your county. And I'll use Kinney County as an example. When Kinney County said, yeah, we want to do criminal trespass, They were averaging 6 to 8 misdemeanor cases a month filed in their court system. So their county clerk handled 6 to 8 cases. Their court coordinator set court for 6 to 8 cases. When we started criminal trespass, we were arresting 150 a week. All right? So you can imagine what this crumbled, a system that really wasn't in place. And I have to admit, when I took this job a year ago in January, I've been a career prosecutor since 1991. When I jumped into this job, I had a calling because we were all volunteering to help Kinney County because they couldn't keep up. So we had prosecutors all over the state from all of BPU jump in and say, I'll do a Zoom docket. Because this is when we were still coming off COVID. We were doing this stuff on Zoom. The court was on Zoom, but also, because I'm going to explain to you, the defendants weren't in Kinney County. I'll tell you where they were. But we all jumped in because it's a huge impact on the system. Well, the governor's office knew that these counties weren't prepared. Kinney County might have 3 cells that people can go in their jail. We're arresting 150 a week, so what are we going to do with them, right? We built 2 processing centers. One is in Del Rio and one is in Hebronville. They are soft side facilities, okay? Government speak for, it's a tent. It's a great big tent. And the one in Jim Hogg is really nice. And I'd like to have one, okay? But they are giant booking desks for a county jail. And we can house up to 96 people through there at any given time. They are processed quickly, and we move them through the system. And then, because we knew local counties would not have a place to house these individuals, they took 2 TDCJ units. One is the Dilley unit, or the Briscoe unit in Dilley. The other is the Segovia unit in Edinburgh, and we converted them to county jails. I'll ask a quick question. Anybody here tell me what's the number one thing you have to do to turn a prison into a county jail? No takers? I got a patch here if somebody can tell me. I know, they're very collectible, BPU patches. At least they are till my new order comes in. You have to give them air conditioning. All right? We can't be putting people in county jail without air conditioning, and we can put them in prison without air conditioning. But that's one of the requirements of the jail commission. So they did that. They converted these units that didn't have AC. We put it in, and that's where we house these folks. If we go to the next slide, please. This is how it kind of happens, and it really has been a really unique logistical standpoint. I'm always fascinating, like Congressman said, talked about how, how Ms. Rose talked about how you could build stuff in 45 days if you want to. I'm a history student. I wanted to be a history teacher. I never wanted to be a lawyer, but a woman led me astray. And about the time it was too late to go back, she didn't want me no more, but the law school was all that was left. So I ended up here instead of being a football coach and teaching history. You know, there's stereotype for you, right? Okay? So, but I've always been fascinated by the ability of the U.S. in times, particularly during World War II, to amass these huge logistical projects that we were able to create. You know, Oak Ridge, Tennessee went from a giant side of a mountain to a town of 50,000 people in 6 months. Functioning, doing stuff. The Manhattan Project, all that stuff, I find the logistics fascinating. This was an interesting study in that. And it was up and running to some extent when I came on board, and then we built some plans to even make it work better. These folks are arrested. They're immediately taken to one of those processing centers where they are booked in. A body scan is done, a full body scan, a mental health screening takes place. They are screened for illness, if it's quick and easy scene illness, okay? They then magistrate them via video magistration from all over the state. We do it twice a day. And the goal is within 12 hours, they leave that booking facility and they're on a van or a bus to Briscoe or Segovia. Okay? They then, as I can see my slide is off, but if they make bond, they are entitled to bond. It is our system. About 50% of them make bond. Up until recently, it was almost all cash. Because if you were a bail bondsman, think about it. Would you write a bond for a guy who's going to get deported? Unless you just really like making donations to a local county, or your business is making too much money and you just got to find a loss, that's one of the issues. But they get detainers at that time, right? So they get a bond, they've got a hold, we take them to Briscoe or Segovia. If they make bond, they go. If they don't, they sit. When they are magistrated, they are told their court date. Because this system works on speed and assembly line. It really is. In most of these counties, they go to court within 13 days of their arrest. Okay? That is faster than just about anybody else runs their court system. And it's the way we have to work because of the numbers, because it backlogs too quick. So the goal is the police prepare their offense report within 48 to 72 hours. That discovery is sent to a defense lawyer who is appointed at magistration differently than any other defense lawyer in the state. I will tell you that too. I'm not exactly saying that I'm espousing it. It just is what it is. They are appointed central lawyers that work together, as opposed to most folks get a local lawyer appointed if they're indigent, and they represent their client. We're fighting a defense system that operates as its own entity altogether. Get to that in just a minute. Okay? But they didn't do court. We do them usually by Zoom solely to save on the transport issue of bringing these folks back and forth to those courthouses because of the cost. The vast majority of those that don't make bond plead guilty. I'm not going to tell you we're giving them life in prison for their misdemeanor. Most of them are sentenced to time served. But we now have created a criminal record for them. And we now have them identified, and they are in our system, and their fingerprints are in our system, and their biometrics are in our system. And then we know when they come back, because we have about 40 or 50 alumni. Some have done it while they were still on bond. Okay? Some have done it after they have been pled guilty and gone back. We have had one who pled guilty from Mexico so he could get his bond money returned. Came in on Zoom from the front of his house and pled guilty. He wanted to get his bond money back for Christmas. We arranged for that, except we wouldn't mail it. The clerk didn't feel comfortable mailing the check to his residence, so he had a relative in post who drove down and got it from Kinney County. Okay? The bond amounts are huge. Kinney County's probably got somewhere between $2 to $3 million in cash bonds that they are presently working on forfeiting some of those on the defendants who have failed to appear after they are removed. After they plead guilty or they make bond, they are released to ICE custody. What happens with them, I don't have a say after that. We don't have a part of that. Sometimes we find out because we rearrest them that they have been removed. Sometimes they show up for court, which means then they got left or got to stay. But we don't get a say in that, but that's where we go. We could do the next slide, please. Okay. Smuggling is our new biggest problem. I said I spent my first year working on getting criminal trespass to run, and it's running pretty good. The folks in those counties are working real hard, and the system seems to have gotten to where it's supposed to be outside of some appellate issues we're fighting. Okay? But smuggling is our new issue. It is increasing and increasing and increasing. Okay? If criminal trespassing is the tour guide of this, smuggling is our Uber. We are now seeing through the processing center about 25% of our magistrations are for smuggling. So for every 3 people we're catching trespassing, we catch a smuggler. I like to use example from our district in the 452nd, which is Mason, McCullough, Menard, Kimball, and Edwards, is Edwards County, Rock Springs. The population is about 1,400 people. Last year we had 805 smuggling arrests. Okay, that's individual people arrested for smuggling. It's not how many counts they had or how many people they had in the car. That's just individual arrests. Some of those had upwards of 8, 10 people in the car. Our normal number is 5 to 6, because that's about how many people will lay on top of each other in the second row of an F-150. But this is happening everywhere. I spend a lot of time in Maverick County, which is kind of our hotbed. The Eagle Pass area is the hotbed of crossing. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 apprehensions a day. That's what BP tells us. And we have thousands of cases waiting to be filed in filing cabinets because we had nowhere at that time to place the people in jail, so they were identified and released. Now, the undocumented folks were turned over to Border Patrol, but 99% of our smugglers are U.S. citizens. Okay? These are folks who get on social media, because that's where they're recruited, and said, look, if you'll drive down and pick these people up, it's not strange to go on this FM road in the middle of the dark and pick up 5 people, and I'll give you $1,000 a head to drive them to Dallas or Houston or San Antonio. And these people are like, what do you mean it's wrong? Okay, sounds too good to be true. It is. But we have a ton of those floating the system. Now that we're set up, we can send them to Briscoe or Segovia. But as you've heard early this morning, those folks on the other side that we're fighting at the cartel, they know where our problems are. We do not have facilities for females. The governor's office is working on that. So most of these counties don't have facilities to house females. So who's driving the cars now? Females. And who else is driving the cars? Juveniles. 16-year-olds and down. We have stopped cars with juveniles from as far away as Louisiana who have driven down here to do a smuggling load. That's in Maverick County. There's not enough juvenile beds to lock these folks up, so they get released on release. We still prosecute them. They still have to come to court. But they're placed on bond. We just don't get to lock them up. So, and some of these cases are really bad because these smugglers don't all just pull over when the lights come on. You probably have seen the videos of the flights. We have people killed regularly when they're trying to evade a smuggling arrest. If we go to the next slide, please. New issues, as I'm talking about, we have this centralized defense. My 3 decades in this business, I was never around a defense that was coordinated. These are all coordinated. And they attack our system right and left. We have a huge burden on the local court systems. So we're having to figure out, how do we go through faster? Think about if those 800 folks in Edwards County want a trial. Now, how many of the 1,400 people in Edwards County can come to jury duty? And how many of them can become permanent employees of the county because they're going to be on jury duty every day for the next 5 years? That's not going to happen, but we're going to figure it out. That's what we do. This is very resource intensive just because of the sheer numbers. And we're not breaking down on it. We just keep fighting it. If we could go to the next one. This is our BPU unit outcomes. Obviously, the governor doesn't just give us money and not ask us to show what we do with it. So this is a total of all the BPU jurisdictions for the last few years of what they have done during their time. The biggest number to look at is the cases filed from 21 to 22. And we doubled. Plus, okay? And when we look at cases prosecuted, there will be a difference between filed and prosecuted. That doesn't necessarily mean they told 6,000 people to walk down the road. That may mean some of those cases were filed with 6 or 7 charges, and they decided they were just going to prosecute 1 or 2 of those charges. So it's still, we're working pretty hard with our numbers. I was really proud to see our organization in our dismissal level that we doubled, and we only added a few over 100 dismissals out of those 9,000 cases that we cleared through. And those are going to happen because things happen in cases you can't imagine, like when your witness decides it's a good idea to drink too much and drive their truck into a tree and no longer be here, and your case goes away with it. But that's just a sad part of prosecution sometimes. If we could go to the next slide real quick. Tell you part of what our response is. We created what we call a strike team. I am part of that. We created my position as the project director for Lone Star. We created a position called the Senior Counsel that is a colleague of mine and works with it. We work in the entire BPU area where people call and say, we need extra help, or we need more experience, or we need somebody who's done this before. We come to town. I was asked the other day, well, what do you do all day, Nelson? And I said, well, let me tell you what I did this morning. At that processing center, we have paralegals from the military department that are assigned to process the paperwork. So it goes to the county attorney's office the same day they get arrested. They get that file immediately. And their air conditioning wasn't working in their portable building. So Nelson got their air conditioning fixed, right? So it's not all quite all big lawyer stuff, right? But whatever needs to be done, we do. And that's what we're doing. We're working in a very fluid environment. Appellate support. We are presently supporting 122 pending appeals of these cases across the state. Most of them are attacking that it is unconstitutional for us to prosecute these people for criminal trespass because really they're just immigrants and that belongs to the federal government. And if the federal government won't prosecute them, then who are we to do it? So therefore, we have exceeded our authority. So I just want y'all to know, we are fighting every day to tell them that you get to tell people who can and come across your place. And we're not going to stop that. We also fought a unique issue that I like to share with folks. About 500 Kinney County cases, they filed what's called a writ of habeas corpus, which is let my guy bring me the body and show me why you've got him locked up. These all cases were filed in Kinney County, Texas. They went down and filed the writs of habeas corpus in Travis County, Texas, in Austin. They got a judge to agree to hear them. The district attorney's office came in and said, hey, we are the exclusive person to be served with writs and filed in our county. And you know what? We agree with the defense, and all these charges should be dismissed. And you in Kinney County and you from the BPU, y'all don't even get to say your piece. You're not allowed to come to the dance. That's what I told the Court of Criminal Appeals when I talked to them. They said, they didn't want you there, did they? I said, no, it's like I asked the girl to go. She said, yes, I got the flowers, I got the car, I took her to dinner. And when we got to the dance, I said, you can't come in. And so we argued that at the Court of Criminal Appeals. The Court of Criminal Appeals listened, and they said, Judge, that's a Kinney County case. 450 cases, Judge, you can't hear them, you can't do anything with them. Those cases belong in Kinney County. That was going to be law if it went the other way. Oh, and by the way, the Third Court of Appeals in Austin, upon the first appeal of that, said, oh, they're right. Kinney County gets no say. But the DA in Travis County can run another piece of the state. We have gotten that, we believe, stopped. We're waiting on the final opinion on the case we argued, but the opinion they came afterwards on the other cases, I think, tell us where we're going. We have provided organizational and setup support with all of these programs. We give an extra eye, an extra hand. I go to court when asked, and so does Ballard. When he was with us, he just recently left to join the new DA in El Paso, with they're trying to rebuild their office. And we just jump in wherever we're needed. So that's kind of where we're fighting what OLS is trying to do with the support from the governor's office, which we asked to get continued, and what BPU does to try and fight all this as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. I know we don't have time for me to take a lot of questions here because we got other folks that really want to speak with you too, but I'm around and will answer any questions you've got. I appreciate you being here and want to give our thanks. I'm available to be contacted. I really don't mind folks calling and talking to me about these issues. I'm a longtime trial prosecutor. Nothing works without folks like you who come to jury service, who provide support, who say you want this stuff done. Because everybody that puts on a uniform, everybody who files papers in the DA's office, everybody goes to court on behalf of the state of Texas is nothing without the support of its citizens. And everything that I do is nothing without the support of the citizens. And we want to make it better because I know how bad it is. Because I'm basically 28 days a month, I live on the border now. And so I know I didn't put a bunch of slides because y'all have seen it. You see it every day. But without fail, your support, your being here, when they send you that card for jury duty, don't look for a way not to go. Look for a way to go. And voice the way you want the law enforced in your community. Because it's become, the running joke of who are jurors? The people not smart enough to get out of jury duty. Well, we need the smart people on jury duty. So I encourage you to do that. That's the biggest step we ever have. And outside of service in our country in time of war, there's no greater service you'll do as a citizen than when you sit in that jury box. because they may not call you from Austin or from D.C. and ask what you think, but you know what? When you sit in the jury box, you get to say what you think about where you live. So I take every opportunity I can to tell people to go do that and tell them how you want where you live to be. So thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here, and let's just all keep up the fight.
Hi, everybody. I'm Craig Sawyer. I'm grateful to be here, and I celebrate the unity being demonstrated by Border 911, the America Project. Sean from Mayhem Solutions, I appreciate you inviting me to meet these fellow patriots who are standing up in a way in unity that is desperately, desperately needed. I love my Jesus Christ and my USA, folks, like I don't have time to express to you. I spent my entire life in defense of everything we hold precious and sacred. I'm a child of Texas, a pastor's son. My great-great-grandpappy was the second governor of Texas. I went off to the Marine Corps, the SEAL team, made my way all the way to the highest level of counter-terrorist operations at SEAL Team 6, went into federal law enforcement on the counter-terrorism side, served there, served in the diplomatic community and the intelligence community. And after 60 countries around the world in service and 100% service disabled veteran status, what I learned, what I began to see was that the real threat was not everywhere that I'd gone. The real threat was right here, right behind my back, by traitors and quislings who were dismantling everything that I was fighting to defend. And what I learned from a friend in the CIA was that the area we'd grown up just north of Houston had become the hottest epicenter of child sex trafficking in the United States, and that it was an estimated $38 to $50 billion a year criminal enterprise, which means it's bigger than all pro sports combined. I'm like, wait a minute, what does this look like? And I began learning what was going on, and I realized this has the earmarks of a domestic covert operation run at industrial scale. I can't tell you how heartbroken and pissed off I got, but I founded Veterans for Child Rescue to expose it and to combat it. So on the tactical side, we run joint operations with federal and local law enforcement, arresting the predators with a 100% conviction rate, putting them in prison to rape no more. We run stuff down in Laredo and Zapata, and we've donated $180,000 highly modified Raptor to the Webb County Attorney's Office. Some of you locals should check that thing out. Sometimes it's a beast. We're grateful to do that. We help round up the runners and the people, crashing through ranchers' gates and squirting out and adults and children. And we're rescuing the children. And we do the same thing on the southern border and the mountains of Arizona. We run joint sting operations. We take the predators off the streets and put them in prison. On the higher scale, on the strategic level, we're going after the culture, to create a culture that's once again protective of children rather than abusive. We spent 3 years filming a documentary film, Contraland. You can find it on our website, vetsforchildrescue.org. It is a good faith public service alert. It's a powerful gut punch documentary film, but you need to know it because knowledge is power. I love the American people, and that's why we filmed that. So everybody deserves to understand what's being done against the future of our nation and against the children. So that's what we're doing. And I realized that the thing that these crooks on the higher end cannot withstand is exposure. And I know that because when I was a federal air marshal, I was forced to blow the whistle on a high-ranking SES-level executive from the top of the FBI. I did it in good faith, knowing it was probably going to be ugly, and I was right. And all the entities assigned to protect a national security whistleblower were found to be corrupt and failed me, and I ended up having to walk away from everything I'd ever worked for in my life. All of my military career and all my federal career combined, gone. But what I learned was how this deep state cabal circle the wagons around their crooks when they are cornered and exposed, like I exposed the one in Las Vegas. He was using his FBI assets to terrorize my family until I had to walk away. But now I know how they run their corruption, and I know how to break it. And I've written out a plan. And if we get a pro-American president back in office, I've got a plan that will help systematically purge our key agencies of the corruption and reset them back in good faith on their chartered missions for God and country. Tom, I want to get that plan to you. I suspect you may be helpful in getting that implemented. So that's why I'm here. I celebrate all of you. I celebrate the unity here. It is so needed. And it's encouraging for me to see this come together, because divide and conquer is a well-known strategy because it works. It's old. It has been used against us. You can see it. We have to recognize it and reject it, denounce it. Don't let them divide us. We have to unite. United we stand, divided we fall, and they've torn us to pieces. So that's it. I want to keep this chat short. This is my intro to you guys, but I'm grateful to be here, and I encourage you to just keep going. We're just starting with this thing, and I know it's going to be powerful. So I appreciate everything that's going on here. After this, we're going to take a 10-minute break, everybody. So go unwind and relax and come back in 10 minutes. I'm Craig Sawyer, Veterans for Child Rescue. Thank you. God bless.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So here, just a quick note. We want you to prepare your questions, because we're going to take about a 20-minute break right now, and then we're going to come back for the Q&A portion, where we want to make sure we take questions from the audience, and it's going to be good. So take 20 minutes and then prepare your questions as well, please. Thank you.
What we got today is the truth that every American needs to know. This border and this country is in a lot of trouble. Tom Homan will make you laugh, and he'll make you cry. The whole group, Jaeson, unbelievable. Everybody involved in this are American patriots. I love you. We love you. We need more truth. Get out there and make it happen. TAP, the American Project. We love you.
All of them hit good points and lots of valid and pertinent information about the border. Jaeson Jones is definitely the expert on the cartels, and he hits it on the nail on the head every time.
I work for the Pinal County Sheriff's Office in Arizona, and I'm second in command for Sheriff Mark Wayne. One of the main reasons this is very important is to get the factual word out, not the watered down version, not the politicized version, because this isn't one side or the other. This is good Americans that are telling you what's actually going on.
Well, what I just learned was from the horse's mouth. There is no way in hell I could have received this type of information or the quality of information than what I've heard right here.
The presentations that were phenomenal. The information that we heard today on the America Project were things that nobody talks about. The stats, the figures, hearing from law enforcement themselves. It was an absolute phenomenal educational time spent here with the America Project, and I hope more people will come to the other events that you guys will hold, or go to the Rumble channel that you guys have at America Project on Rumble and follow what you guys are doing, because the information was outstanding.
Anyway, it's been almost 16 years ago. First off, I'm a veterinarian and I'm a rancher. I've got a ranch. I live about 10 miles south of Falfurrias, Texas, and in Brooks County, Texas. And my closest neighbor is the largest checkpoint in the nation for the Border Patrol. It's 4.5 miles south of my house. And then I have another ranch, a couple of ranches over in Jim Hogg County, Hebronville. You saw Jaeson Jones' presentation about the guys carrying the automatic weapons halfway. That gate, I drive by it just about every day between Falfurrias and Hebronville. We have a satellite clinic in Hebronville, and our main office is in Falfurrias. So we've been dealing with this issue for a long time. The first person to die on my ranch was in 1991, and he ran from the Border Patrol, and it was a real hot day, and he had a heart attack climbing over the fence, my north fence, and he was from Pakistan. And since, I guess since '85, we've started having traffic through there, and it just started escalating. And it really got big during the Clinton administration, and that's when we started seeing people from China. And I'm talking big groups. And probably it's been almost 16 years ago, myself and some other people were so overwhelmed by all the property damage and all the people that are coming through. My home's been broken into. My wife's been threatened. She's had her car nearly carjacked at the front gate. Other people having their wives carjacked at the front gates coming into their ranches. And then a lot of my clients, my practice area covers 16 counties along the southern border in South Texas, all the way from Eagle Pass all the way to Brownsville. And I've probably got over 300 large ranch accounts there. We have a big veterinary practice, and absolutely every single one of those ranchers is dealing with the smuggling of people and drugs through their property, some of them worse than others. And just about all of them that have property on the river have already been threatened and have already left the ranch, moved to McAllen, Corpus Christi, or San Antonio, or even Dallas. And that property has devaluated as a result of all the smuggling activity. I just got a call from one of the leading brokers, ranch brokers, just to give me some statistics. And 4 of the last ranches that he's sold within the past 2 weeks are people that are leaving the ranch, leaving South Texas, moving out, and sold that property for 44% less than the appraised value. And of course, that has an effect on the state and the counties because of the tax devaluation going with the sale of that ranch. But anyway, back to Brooks County and the dead bodies showing up. Because of that, and because of all the violence and the lawlessness that's been going on and escalating over the past couple of decades, myself and some other individuals started a group called the Texas Border Volunteers. We've been, and we go out monthly, watch these trails that are coming through private property, and back 16 years ago, we identified over 600 smuggling trails between Laredo, Texas, and the coast coming through private property. And this is what we do. We go out and watch these trails and call the Border Patrol when the perpetrators come through and help them get them apprehended. So anyway, with that, we find a lot of dead bodies. We rescue a lot of people that have been left behind, and we report a lot of traffic. And just over the past few years, we've reported over 9,000 and got probably at least 80% of them apprehended.
Side story, Border Patrol's been pretty zealous in monitoring my statistics, but they did agree with the 500,000, but they said, we only catch 1 in 6. So that tells you how many millions.
How many loads of dope you get coming through your ranch?
Well, our sheriff has pretty well shut that down, but
Because of the Sabre team.
Before Mark Daniels is Cochise County Sheriff. He started the Sabre team. Before that, we were inundated with mostly marijuana, either vehicles or mules, backpackers. In the last 5 years, with real-time game cameras, prosecution from our county attorney, we've got 0 drugs on our ranch. And we enforce the law. That's all that happened. The Border Patrol, I've led them on the ranch since 1991. They rarely caught a load of dope, and they never prosecuted anybody. And our sheriff turned it around overnight. And we have 5 deputies on that Sabre team. We got a 400-man station 3 miles from the border down there. When people say we need to fix our immigration laws, no, we just need to enforce them. That's been the biggest turnaround for us is our sheriff. Governor Ducey was good to Cochise County and the Border Strike Force team. I agree with Doc Vickers. When Trump was president, it was a trickle. Before Biden even got elected, when he promised amnesty to 11.5 million, we had a group at the house the next day. They tell me, and the illegals are telling me and Border Patrol, you caught us, but you can't do anything to us because your president wants us here. That's a fact.
I remember the day the fentanyl came out, and my dealer said, you know, I've got these new pills, they're fake oxys. He didn't tell me they were fentanyl because nobody knew what fentanyl was yet. He just said they're 100 times stronger and they're only $5 more. And I was just like, okay, because I was getting a pretty high tolerance at this point. Well, at first it was just fun, right? It was just for fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, our angel moms. Thank y'all for being here. Please sit down.
Well, we wanted to take this opportunity because I'm a big believer that you need to see, and it's important for us to see the real effects and the ripple effects that this open border, non-border, is having. You know, I talked to the ladies here, and for me it's very hard to identify as a victim of a crime, but I was. I was also a victim at the hands of the cartels. And so we want them to share their story. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to give them all the time to introduce themselves. They're going to share their story. And most importantly, it's not just a story, but that they're here fighting for a very, very important cause and what they're doing with that cause. And let's start with Virginia, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Virginia Krieger. I'm the co-president of Lost Voices of Fentanyl. I lost my daughter, Tiffany, in 2015 to a counterfeit pill that was made to look just like a Percocet that was pure fentanyl and claimed her life. My daughter didn't do anything unusual. She injured her back. She went to the emergency room. She went to her doctor just like any one of us would do. She got referred out to a neurosurgeon. And it was during that time while she was waiting for that neurosurgeon appointment that an acquaintance did something that we do in society every day. They saw that she was hurting and they offered her a pill. I have an extra Percocet. She was in pain and she accepted it, and that act of kindness killed her. Right now we have this year we seized more than 50.6 million of these counterfeit pills. And they're claiming lives as young as 13 years old, 12 years old. Simple acts of kindness that are no longer safe in our society. Last year, we buried 71,248 lives to fentanyl poisonings. And I use that word poisoning, and it's important that we do, because what happened to my daughter wasn't an overdose. That word implies that she wanted fentanyl, she went out and sought fentanyl, that there was a recommended dose for illicit fentanyl, and that she exceeded that dose. That isn't what happened to her. Someone very deliberately disguised a deadly substance as something less harmful, and they put it out in the public domain for another to consume, and it killed her. That's a poisoning by its very definition. 71,248 of our fellow Americans were poisoned and murdered last year alone. And that number is going to continue to rise until we get action, until our government recognizes these as poisonings, until we start to take action against these brutal cartels who are responsible for each and every one of these fentanyl-related deaths. And that's where we've started to take action. Our families are gathering together. We marched on Washington this past fall. We're going to do it again this year. And we're demanding that these cartels be named foreign terrorist organizations, that illicit fentanyl be added to the weapon of mass destruction list, and we're humanizing this crisis so that people can see the names and the faces of the victims. This isn't limited to any one group of people. It's not those people, as many think. It's not prescription fentanyl that we're talking about. Right now, the greatest national security risk we have in this country comes every Friday night when any one of your children or loved ones go out with their friends and they are influenced to try or even experiment with a drug of any kind. We're finding these pills that are mimicking Xanax, Adderall, Vicodin, Percocet, oxycodone, OxyContin. It's in ecstasy, methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin. So most of the public doesn't know about it. Within 30 days of COVID, the federal government warned everyone in this country 3 things: wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands. We're 10 years deep into this fentanyl crisis, and the majority of the public thinks it's prescription fentanyl, and they think that it can't happen to them. I thought it couldn't happen to me until the day I got that phone call telling me that my daughter was gone. It can happen. And that's what's the most important thing, is the random nature of this, because it is so widespread at this point. It is so diffuse in the black markets that nobody is immune from it. Nobody is entirely safe. You know, we are the ones who had to find out through the data that's available that fentanyl is the #1 cause of death for ages 18 to 45 in this country. Fentanyl. You know, they have not warned the public. They have not educated the public. They haven't even assessed the problem. We don't know how many injuries there are every day. We only know how many die, and we only know that a year and a half after the fact. So to say that this has been mismanaged from the ground up is an understatement. And I just want to thank everyone here with the America Project for paying attention, taking this seriously, and for helping us with working solutions that are going to solve this problem. And to all of you for coming here today. Thank you.
Virginia, please tell all of us where people can follow you online.
We have a Lost Voices of Fentanyl is the name of our organization. You can find us at the letters LV like Victor, OF.org. We currently have a victim banner project that we're working on. We have Humanizing the Crisis. We have 56 faces on each banner, which are now on display at the DEA Memorial Museum. We have 21 of them so far. We hope to have 100 of them by the end of this year, showing the names, the ages, the faces of those we're losing. They look like anybody. They could be anyone's kid. They could be anyone's brother or sister or parent. And I did want to add one last footnote. The collateral damage from this crisis has yet to even be recognized. In Ohio alone in 2019, more than 15,000 children entered foster care due to the death of one or both parents as a direct result of this crisis. Right now, we are creating the next generation of emotionally damaged children who are growing up unrecognized as victims of this crisis. We have hundreds of thousands of grieving family members out there who've received no support. In fact, we've gotten less than support. We're being bullied into silence. And it's time for us to speak and be loud. We're going to host another rally this year in September in Washington, D.C., and I hope that you'll join us so that we can demand in one voice, no more.
Thank you, Virginia.
Right there, Chief, right there.
Got him. Hey, we got the bodies, Make a right, bro, make a right. Okay, guys, right underneath the helo. Keep on going, bro, keep on going. Right there you go.
And I think today what we saw here is indicative of what we've been seeing over the last 24 months. I mean, in this case, you had two, basically juveniles abandoned by a trafficker with a larger group, probably because they couldn't keep up. And what's disturbing is, it's 30 degrees out here. They got no food, no water, minimal clothes. And imagine the resources it takes that we spent today trying to find a group of two, with 2 helicopters and our partners in the United States Border Patrol.
Office. This is Victor Avila from ICE. We are shot. We are on the highway of Trento, Mexico, we've been shot and attacked on the highway. I am an ICE special agent. What is your name, you said, sir? Victor Avila, please call Jerry Miles. I don't have another phone. So where did you look at? Please call Jerry Miles. We've been shot on the highway. Highway? What is the highway, sir? To where? Mexico, Querétaro. They know where I'm at. Okay. Try to remain online, please.
That's the call I made on February 15, 2011, after we got ambushed by the Zetas cartel while on assignment in Mexico, and Special Agent Jaime Zapata tragically lost his life next to me. I'm before you by the grace of God after being shot 3 times. And so talk about this being personal. It absolutely is personal. I've seen the destruction of what's happening in Mexico and the lack of accountability in Mexico, which is a big, big issue. President Trump is the only one I can think of that last held Mexico accountable for their inaction. You know, Jason talked about designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. We will get there. President Trump got very close, and Mexico begged them not to do it. Not to do it, because can you imagine having the Sinaloa cartel, the Cartel Jalisco New Generation, the Gulf Cartel? These would be terrorist organizations right here, not 6,000 miles away in the Middle East. But that's why I do this, and what I want to do for this portion, because we want people to understand, you guys better than anybody because you're here, but for those that are not present or watching through the stream, I wanted somebody local to come and share firsthand experiences that they live in every day, in and out every day. And the next person that's going to speak to you is that person. Her name is Allison Anderson. She's a local rancher. Husband is a Border Patrol agent. And she is going to share with you realities of what they face every day. She's going to talk. I'm going to let her do the talking. And I came across with her, make contact with her on Facebook, but we had some common friends. And I saw her, I think she was doing a news hit. I said, I've got to get in touch with her. Because she's a patriot. She's a fighter. And this is the inspiration that I get from the locals stepping up and being vocal. Make sure you follow her on Facebook, Allison Anderson, and welcome her right now. Thank you.
Well, hi, how is everybody? All right. Thank you for that great introduction. And just to clarify, I'm not the rancher. Mama's not a rancher. But we did have a wonderful opportunity to live on a ranch southeast in Brewster County here for many years. And I'll get to that here in just a second. But I wanted to start by saying I don't have any fancy acronyms after my name or any official titles other than just a loudmouth housewife, really. But illegal immigration and dealing with them is something that I'm very compassionate about because it affects my life, my family, our little girls, and it affects my husband at work. So just to give you a little bit of backstory about how we ended up out here. This microphone's goofy. So I'm a mother of 3 little beautiful girls. Their ages are 7, 5, and 2. And right now, my husband and I own a little chunk of property out in Valverde County, out by Lake Amistad. And he is currently also a Border Patrol agent in Del Rio sector, and he's on the Horse Patrol unit in Del Rio. For me and my family, we've been dealing with illegals and their destruction and the many dangers that surround each encounter with them for many years now at this point. And I'm not talking about the family units, those that come across and give up. What we have always seen on our properties are specifically the illegals with prior and extensive criminal histories and illegals with felony convictions, essentially the gotaways. We currently live outside of Del Rio, as I just stated, and we just started our 3rd year there. But before moving to Del Rio, we lived on a very large ranch that spanned over both Brewster and Terrell counties, which bordered the river. and the ranch was literally the most beautiful place that I'd ever seen, with landscapes that were absolutely breathtaking. The terrain was both rugged and unforgiving, and it was as remote as you could possibly get, but it was also crawling in illegals. We would have groups that would cross the river, cut through the ranch, multiple groups and very large groups. They would often break up into smaller groups as they headed north through the ranch to better their odds of not getting caught, but on any given day, there were always groups on the ranch. So on the ranch, our house was tucked down in this magnificent canyon, and aside from its overwhelming beauty, it made for great cover for groups, where the illegals would lay up in, they'd hide in, try to avoid apprehension and detection in, and they would use the draws to cross by our house on both ends, east and west of our house. So it started off occurring on a very unregular basis, quickly changed and became very regular to where it was happening almost nightly and daily, where we would have multiple groups that started surrounding our house. And as soon as the sun would set out there, the brush, as I always explain it, would literally come to life. So we would constantly be having the illegals that would cause the damage and the theft, along with their incessant breaking into the homesteads on the ranch. And the following are just some of the countless encounters that we've had while we lived out there. We had smugglers that we caught peering in through our kitchen window at night a few feet from where our infant daughter was sleeping. He would be the amazing gentleman that is hogtied in the back of our side-by-side in one of these pictures here. We've had illegals that have tried to break into our home twice while we were home. And I often talk about the time where it was myself who was home alone, but this time I'm going to talk about how it was my mom. So on this time, I was actually on my way home from Alpine. I was here at the hospital having a biopsy done on my thyroid. And as I got through Marathon on the way home, I hit that last spot of highway where it's the last spot you have cell service. And I get a call from my mom. She was at the house who was watching our older daughter while I had our newborn daughter with me. And when I answered, I could immediately hear the panic and the fear in her voice. And she said in this little whisper, "Allison, there's an illegal here, and he's trying to rip the screen door off and get inside." And then she tells me that she had grabbed the .38, and she was going to do everything in her power to keep my daughter safe. And that's when I lost cell service. So it was about another hour until I knew whether or not my daughter and my mother were safe or not, if they had been harmed or not, and if help had arrived in time or not. So the feelings and the emotions that you go through in these moments of not knowing are indescribable, and they're excruciating. And then on another encounter shortly after that, I had 4 male illegals that showed up outside of the house. Again, I was home alone. They had their hoods up, and I had stepped outside to feed the horses, and they had immediately popped up on the far side of our rock wall where I couldn't see them if I were to look out the window. And as soon as I stepped out, they started yelling at me, making demands, and when I refused their demands, that's when they became aggressive. Then they figured out that my husband wasn't home and I was there by myself. They started making advances towards the home. They started making advances towards me while I had my little girls playing in the room, in the next room. So aside from that, illegals have stolen vehicles, tools. They've damaged the fences on the ranch beyond repair. They've destroyed the water lines, I don't know how many times at this point. But that would often leave either my family or the rancher or both of us without running water for about 24 to 48 hours. At the same time, dumping thousands of gallons of water out into the dirt, burning out well pumps. I'm sure a lot of you folks know exactly how much a well pump costs in here. And then again, being in West Texas, I know I don't have to explain the importance of water for livestock, not to mention what it's like having little babies and no running water. We've also had illegals that have been found naked sleeping in the rancher's bed after they broke into his house. Illegals have broken into the ranch's headquarters and helped themselves to whatever they felt entitled to, used a phone to make 2 to 4 hour long-distance phone calls to other countries and not at their expense, while washing their unmentionables in the kitchen sink. Now, one of the most specific encounters or significant encounters for me was when an illegal literally stalked me from the brush, from our front yard. And this man popped up from the brush, and he made sure that I saw him. And I can still remember the smirk that he had on his face. And as I'm standing there trying to process the situation, he started to charge at me. And as he ran, and I was trying to make my way back to the house, where my daughters again were inside sleeping, the only thing that mattered to me in that moment was being able to get between him and my daughters, to be able to ensure their safety, which when I made it through the gate outside of our front porch, he was still, when I glanced behind me, he was still coming up from behind me, and that's when I pulled my firearm and I fired around, which got him to stop, and he put his hands up while he continued moving forwards towards me. So I grabbed the phone. Well, I had to grab the phone and call Border Patrol. My husband was on duty that day, but grabbing the phone from inside the kitchen meant that I had to take my eyes off of him for a split second, which I didn't want to do, but I knew that I had to. I grabbed the phone, called the Border Patrol station, and while on the phone with the station, this man was now trying to come up to the gate and get through the gate, at which point I set the phone down, and with my pistol, I had to have an exchange of words with him on what was going to happen if he continued to proceed through that gate and threaten me or my girls. And I have learned over the years that a firearm speaks a very universal language when you're out on an isolated ranch. This situation remains one of the most significant reasons why I'm here speaking on this matter today and why I continue speaking in a lot of places on this matter, because I know that this man had bad intentions. I don't know how long he had been in the brush watching me or watching the house or watching for movement from within the house, but I know what types of criminals were coming through the ranch, and I know what I may have looked like being a female out there by myself. So on this day, the first Border Patrol agent to respond to my emergency 911 call, the first agent to arrive to our home was my husband. I mean, how would you feel having to respond to an emergency call that comes from your own family? And then knowing that we're an hour away from any kind of emergency response, you have to wait that amount of time before you figure out whether or not your family is okay. We've had countless encounters with illegals on the ranch, and I often forget to mention how many of them that we have saved the lives of by getting them the life-saving emergency care that they needed to survive after being found out there. But we have also had many more encounters with illegals where they have become aggressive, combative, and non-compliant. We have never had an encounter with a single family unit on the ranch, not one. But we've had plenty of illegals that have been apprehended and have been convicted of rape, aggravated kidnapping, manslaughter, assault, various weapons charges, among other countless charges. Towards the end of our time living on the ranch, the encounters had become too intense and stressful, and no one talks about the toll that living like this takes on your mental health. Because I know for myself, it was hard to sleep at night knowing exactly what was walking around outside our house. Outside, I was always scanning the brush and checking for foot sign around our gates. I was afraid to go to town for groceries, not knowing what or who I'd come home to inside our home. And I worried about not if, but when my luck was going to run out there. I loved that ranch. But when we found out that we were expecting our third daughter, it was just no longer a risk that we were willing to take out there. So shortly after finding out that we were expecting our third little girl, we made the decision to move to Del Rio because we wanted to give our daughters the normalcy and the safety that they deserved as little girls, like simply a yard that they could play safely in and some peace of mind for us. But however, since moving to Del Rio, things went from good to bad and pretty quickly, especially after the Biden administration took office. We have loadout vehicles now speeding up and down our street multiple times a day, and they're even running in tandem. Illegals have tried breaking into the homes in our neighborhood. Illegals have set fire on our property. Illegals have been found hiding in our neighbor's boat. We've had illegals convicted of rape caught heading towards our property just before they crossed into it. My husband was at the port of entry, and he worked the entire Haitian invasion that happened there. He's also had to do chest compressions on a little girl that was pulled out of the river. She was the same age as our own daughter, and it was later learned after she had gone to the hospital that she had been savagely brutalized and basically torn in half, suspected as being used as payment to cross the river by her loving mother, who I have heard has already fled the country. We've had suspected dopers crossing through our property in the middle of the day and without any concern for being caught. We've had groups of illegals up on our decks trying to look in our windows, 3 times that we know of, 2 times at our daughter's bedroom window, and one time where they were heard knocking, trying to lure our daughters to the bedroom window at night after they watched my husband leave for work. Recently, we had 2 groups on our property at the same time, with 5 more known groups that were heading towards our property. My husband was on his day off, and he ended up out in the brush working the groups on our property with the other agents that responded. And I've lost count of how many times that I've had to watch my husband walk off and out of sight into our own brush working groups of illegals. Always anxiously waiting for him to come back into sight while I stand guard over our house and over our daughters until he does. We had a smuggling bailout happen on our property where we had multiple DPS units in the helicopter overtop our house. The driver and the illegals fled on foot into our property and towards our house. DPS caught the driver on our property, and Border Patrol caught 3 more in our neighbor's barn. There have been high-speed smuggling pursuits all over the county. Recently, Del Rio Sector Border Patrol announced that we had 157 smuggling pursuits happen in 1 week. That's just 1 week. Many of these pursuits end in wrecks, and they jeopardize the safety of citizens on the road every single day. We had one that wrecked right down the street from our daughter's bus stop. You could see it from the bus stop. And again, my husband was the first EMS responder to that wreck. One smuggling pursuit that stands out to me the most, though, was on Christmas Eve. In Kinney County, there was a DPS smuggling pursuit that wrecked, and the subjects exited the vehicle and opened fire on the troopers. The call came out over the radio that shots had been fired, and my husband was one of the first agents to arrive on scene. He was on the ground with the DPS canine actively working that group, and he had sent the girls and I very cryptic "I love you" messages via text, which I didn't realize at the time exactly the weight that those messages held, because it hit me hard when I learned that he was at the scene and that those messages could have been the last that he sent. It would still be hours that I ended up waiting until I knew whether or not he was okay, not to mention our friends that were also on scene, if they were okay or not. And then a few days ago, on our property, I had a run-in with, in a very heated exchange of words, with a suspected smuggler who was refusing to leave. Del Rio sector is close to averaging 4,000 gotaways a week right now. How many more violent criminal illegals have already walked right through our backyards and into our neighborhoods and into our communities? And in closing, I'll just say, I've already personally addressed the governor, and I've already addressed the legislators and other officials at the Capitol in Austin. I've been on the news many times, running my mouth as usual about this. And on the Border Patrol side of things, I've also met with Chief Ortiz, and I've expressed my concerns with how this crisis impacts our agents, specifically their mental health, because their job is to secure our border, and that is what they need to be doing. We need a congressman who is dedicated to fighting for the safety and the security of his constituents and citizens rather than fighting for amnesty for illegals. Because we are past the time of talks. Thank you. Thank you. We are past the time of talks. We are past the time of town hall meetings around here on the border. We need action today. What more needs to happen before that action is taken? Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for your courage. And if we can we play a round of applause for Agent, her husband, Border Patrol Agent Anderson. Thank you for your duty and for your service.
All right, so I'm compelled to speak on a couple of things. First of all, that's one brave woman right there. But she's exactly right. The Border Patrol agents need our support. They're the finest 20,000 men and women I've ever had the honor to work with. They're American heroes, but have been thrown under the bus by this administration. 14 of these men and women committed suicide last year. 14. Now, I can't say the out-of-control border was the reason for it, but it certainly weighed on whatever internal struggles they were having to see things they see every day. You saw earlier the film where I'm arguing with a congressman. He said I didn't care about dying children unless they were white. I've held dying children. I've held dead children. I've talked to girls as young as 10 that got raped multiple times. It screwed me up. And that's why it changed who I was, and that's why I fight so hard. And you just heard her story. The men and women Border Patrol need our support. Is one of the things TAP is doing. We're going to hold this administration responsible, and we're going to demand action, and we're going to file lawsuits. Because the men and women of the Border Patrol deserve better. These men and women were slandered by the President of the United States and the Secretary of Homeland Security from the White House podium, saying they whipped black people. They didn't whip anybody. They were innocent. The only ones that did anything wrong that day were the Haitian immigrants who went to the country illegally, ignored federal orders to stop, which is a felony. But no one talked about it. They just talked about the men and women wearing green. My proudest years are wearing that uniform. So you got my commitment, and you got TAP's commitment. We're going to continue suing this administration, and Border Patrol is going to be held upright like they're supposed to be, and they should be, because they're the finest 1% this country has.
Well, it's your turn. We're all ears. So Jaeson's going to join us up here. Tom, please join us here at the mic. If you want to come up and ask your questions, your concern, we want to hear from you. We want to be able to, remember, we're recording this for a reason, because we go around the country and share this with the people that don't see it all the time, that we don't want the excuse anymore that, oh, we don't know what's going on, or we didn't know that was happening at the border. That's not going to be an excuse anymore. We're going to tell you, we're going to shove it down your throat, you will know. And this is the time for you guys to tell us. Please, ma'am, if you could come up to the mic.
I don't want to be filmed, but
Okay.
we have the ranch that Allison and Dave lived on for a little while. And the incidences, a lot of the pictures that you saw were from our ranch. And a lot of the things that she talked about is a drop in the bucket of what's really happening out there. I mean, and some of it we joke about, like the guy that was in our bed, you know, when my husband went in and, you know, told him, hey, you know, get the heck out of my bed. And he said, leave me alone, I'll be gone in the morning. You know, I mean, that's kind of a funny joke, because he had his clothes folded, you know, in his little bottle of water. But then there's other times when my husband and our hired men have been surrounded, where groups dressed in camo have come up, big backpacks, and surrounded him. My husband has had to fire at them, not being able to get to a phone because we have no phones or cell service. The ranch that we have is 338 sections, which is over 220,000 acres. So it's a lot of country. We are on the major crossing from Mexico for all sorts of stuff. People, we've had a lot of dead bodies and a lot of people left behind. My husband came across a 18-year-old girl, 8 months pregnant. She did survive, thank God, but comatose. You know, he's also picked up, I don't know, 11 to 14-year-old little girl, and Border Patrol have a saying, it's ugly, but it's true. Every day, all the way is what they say about these people being molested. But anyway, I just wanted to say that what Allison has talked about is a fraction of what's really, really happening. My husband deals with it. We deal with it every day. And it's pretty bad, and things need to be changed and done. And like I was telling Dave, you know, because Dave used to work in Sanderson, and that's how we met. And before he was married, you know, we had him come live in one of our houses because it's a lot of country, and we were hoping, you know, just having a presence down there. We've had Border Patrol, what are they called? Details, you know, because we'd like to have people out there, and it's just too far, too big a country, too rough. But, well, Anyway, it's something that we really need to get changed. We can't even call the Sanderson station anymore because you just get an automated reply. Please leave a message. Nobody's there to answer because they're so busy addressing all the traffic that happens on Highway 9.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If you had one request right now, and that request would come through and it would be granted either by the state government or federal government, what would that request be?
Well,
Is
that's too
it a
big.
wall? Is
Oh,
it?
as far as border security?
Yes. What would you like to see happen immediately?
Well, that's too big of a loaded question. I'm a first-generation immigrant. On my mother's side, I've got a cousin. His mom and aunt and grandparents spent 11 years in a refugee camp to get to our country in the 60s before we could get them sponsored to come. So I get the whole wanting to come, and I don't know, it's too big to say I would want for one thing. You know, I'm a teacher, so what can you say? Educate people better?
Education.
I mean, I don't know. Ma'am?
Yeah.
People, right.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's because it's ugly, and people do like to ignore it. Okay, go ahead, Dave. Thanks.
I definitely think, especially out here, just the vastness of the terrain, just the fact that, you know, you're not in El Paso, you're not, you know, in San Diego, where you can make a phone call and either local police or somebody will be there within a couple of minutes. Emergency services are right around the corner. You know, it's from Eagle Pass to here, there's nothing, minus Marfa, and then another 100, you know, either way, there's no cell phone coverage, there's no radio coverage, even as law enforcement, radio coverage is spotty, and we have a lot of ranchers out here that, you know, they come across these people by themselves. They're either out mending fence, you know, sorting cows, sorting their stock, and you're all of a sudden surrounded by 10, 15 people. You don't know where they're from. All you know is they're not supposed to be there. They're not supposed to be on your property. And so it becomes a situation where, holy smokes, do I run and go get a phone? What can I do? So out here, I think the terrain and the vastness it makes it especially dangerous, not just for the law enforcement, but for you guys. You know, you guys are out mending fence, fixing water lines that these people have punched holes in. You spend most of your days not being cowboys, but being plumbers. You know, mending fence, not being on horseback, not doing the things you love. Instead, you're maintaining your property because of the damage that is being done by people who are not supposed to be here. And so you asked what would I want? You know, I've had a lot of questions like that, you know, being in the position that I'm in. And they said, what about a wall? In my 15 years of being in this outfit, how many years it would take to build a 22-foot wall? It takes 5 minutes to build a 23-foot ladder. So, you know, that we have all these natural, I guess, border barriers. I've seen those folks crawl up goat trails. It doesn't matter. And out here, the groups aren't 10. You know, out on the, you know, further east, there are groups of 30 plus. Easy. So imagine being a rancher and being one man out there, one woman, you know, especially for my wife. You know, I was from Sanderson to the place that we lived, it was an hour drive. You had service at one point, cell phone service. So my wife was out there with our kids by herself. You know, and she is a strong woman, I tell you that. And I'd be more scared of her. But, you know, this is every day for folks in this area. You know, you got your property, a couple thousand acres, you know, up to, you know, 330 sections. It's a big deal out here.
Thank you for that. So, I got one question for you, Mr. Agent. You know the way this game's played in Border Patrol, right? Class 167, what were you? All right, congratulations on that. Border Patrol agents always compare classes. As a matter of fact, I went through a checkpoint yesterday, the checkpoint over here by Van Horn. So there's a young agent there, and he asked us our citizenship. I says, Class 167, you? He goes, wow. I says, what class? He goes, 1178.
My brother lives at the ranch right 13 miles from Sanderson, and he came home from work. His business is in Sanderson, so he came home and he saw just one guy, and he popped up. Then Bobby went inside, came back out. It's just to give you something to compare against. I grew up on that ranch, and it was I was probably about 12 or 13, and I used to rodeo, and I was riding my horses. Everybody else in my family was not home. I was the only one at the ranch. And 5 illegals walked up to me and asked me where my dad was. And in Spanish, I answered. And they went on their way. They didn't want anything, and I had no fear. Today, I carry a gun. I carry a 9mm, and I carry it legally, but I go nowhere with that. I'm in the education field, and I go all the way from Presidio to Kermit, Midland, Odessa, Balmorhea. I go all over West Texas. I don't go anywhere with that gun, because my mother, who has passed away a year and a half ago, she has been stopped on the road. They get in the middle of the road and they stop you. And I often think, you know, that could happen to me, especially when I'm going to Presidio or Alpine or Sanderson. And that's all.
Seems like Ms. Stegall wants me to say something. My name is Forrest Stunberg. My family's been out here since the 1890s. We used to have a really huge ranch, not so much anymore, but anyway. I'm gonna just think about this for a minute. As Arlene just got through saying, we've got about 12, 13 agents, and we lost a good one because they had to run off and move. And we've got, Arlene, how many officers we got in Sanderson now? 4? 3? 3. All right, there's 3 members in the Sheriff's Department. And Brewster County's now got, I don't remember how many. We had a sheriff's deputy here, maybe 8, okay? Covering how many thousands of square miles? Now, we've had illegals, and again, everybody has. But you're here like tonight. My wife and I'll drive to the ranch. Not a big deal. I slow down before we get there and look. I got 10 dogs. One of them dogs is going to tell me if something's going on. So I'll know if something's going on before I get to the house. But let's say something is going on. Well, I've got Brewster County Sheriff, and I've got Terrell County Sheriff's on speed dial. Okay? But so what? What if the deputy that covers our part of the county is interlingua? Well, what if the deputies in Sanderson are out on the highway? What if a Border Patrol agent, I think Dan will tell you, is down there on the other side of Lane Tree, or down on the San Francisco. What the hell is the use in calling? Who's going to show up? I'm an hour from, driving pretty good. I'm an hour from Alpine. What do you do? Oh, you bet your ass. I'll give you another example. Anybody here familiar with the Hispanic witches? Avila?
No.
Oh, it's kind of a fun story if you ever get around any that believe in the old ways. I was up on top of the mountain, just south of the house, up on Old Gap, looking. And I found and this may sound weird, but it's all related. I found a crow upside down on a cross. Okay? Tied onto the cross with barbed wire up on one of my fence posts. Folks, that is a threat, an absolute threat to my household. That means somebody up there got kind of mad at me. Might have been because I might have sent an airmail to him telling him to go away. Now, I wouldn't hold up in court. Well, sir, he came down and already been threatened. Why were you threatened? Well, this crow. Well, I'm sure that federal judge or county judge would think that was pretty funny, but it's not. It's not funny at all. So you sit there and think to yourself, okay, is he coming tonight, tomorrow, the next day? Well, I've got 10 dogs. They alert me if somebody's within a mile of the ranch house. Guarantee it. Another example, what goes on in this country, just ranch just north and west of us, the foreman and his wife were accosted and tied up and left on the fence. They were tied to the fence. Okay, that doesn't sound like much, except they were tied with barbed wire. Okay? That ain't funny, is it? Luckily, the son of the rancher found them within a few hours. But they were in pretty bad shape. So what do you do? I don't know. Well, I do know what you do. Can't say it out loud. But what is the government doing? I'll tell you what the government's doing. Not a goddamn thing.
Well, let me speak to, Allison, you talked about the Congress needs to step up and do something. That's one thing TAP's going to do, sir. We're going to call out the congressmen who don't give a shit about what you guys are going through down here. We're going to call them out. We're going to take them on. I actually was with Benny Martinez. We went down to Brooks County. I was with Benny Martinez's deputies for 4 hours, and in 4 hours we found 2 dead bodies. In 4 hours, 2 dead bodies. And I talked to Benny. I said, Benny, how many bodies have you found this year? Over 100 bodies in this county. He's got 5 deputies in himself because 1 deputy was injured. And he told me this. They're so busy dealing with the immigration crisis, they don't have time to be deputies. So that takes away from all the folks in Brooks County who needs law enforcement, but they're busy out in the middle of nowhere finding dead bodies and trying to do an investigation on that. And so I have personally spoken to the governor, and one of the things, when I joined TAP, I agreed to do the congressional outreach because I know a lot of people on the Hill. We're going to hold them accountable. We're going to call them out. We're going to call your congressman out here who doesn't seem to want to secure the border. And we're going to take it on. So I think more funding needs to be given to from the federal government to local sheriffs. Sheriffs are the frontline defense in America, and they need to be funded by the federal government to make sure you're safe. So we're going to push this legislation. We're working with legislators. We're working with a team of attorneys. We're going to fight the fight, and I'm not saying we're going to win it, but we won't stop fighting. So we'll do what we can to make sure local sheriffs get the proper funding they need. And I want to just mention one thing. For those who came up the microphone and spoke, if you don't want your face on our video, please come up and see us afterwards. I already know, ma'am, you said no. If you don't want your, but if it's okay to use your voice, we like to have your voice. So anybody has a problem with being on video or their voice, make sure you stop up and see us at the end of this, so make sure we cut you out. We want to make sure we protect you.
All right. Well, thanks, you guys. Thanks for coming, and it makes me feel good to see so many of my community out here. We want to thanks for those of y'all that came a long way. Thanks for coming out from Sanderson and you know where y'all are at. My gosh, there's not even a name for where you live, but you know, we go through out here. I have a degree in wildlife management, and it's. You know, you get these crazy people that get these crazy ideas that say things like, well, you know, out of sympathy because of something they saw on TV, you know, we need to reintroduce grizzly bears, you know, wouldn't that be wonderful for nature? And then here's us having to live with those decisions. And we're going through the same thing right now for a bunch of people that think they're being sympathetic and don't realize what we're living with out here. I want to just give you a little parable. The strength of a wall, the strength of a kingdom's wall is not so much merited in the genius of its engineers, but the willingness of its king to defend it. When the king wants to leave the gate open all night and put the guards on custodial duties while wagons are coming back and forth, little hay wagons all night long, apparently the king is making money some other way, okay? And we've got that going on right now. I know I'm open to correction on this, but I believe that our border wall, when the construction on that was halted, I believe we were up to close to 65, depending on what you consider complete, 65, maybe pushing to up to 70% of the intended area. It was supposed to be constructed in various stages of development. And what we've seen now with the wall, with a new, whatever you want to call him, in office, we've seen that the flow has actually increased from what it was ever before. And we're seeing some really bad stuff. And apparently, the game has changed. If we're fishing and we got our lines in the water, we got our nets in the water, and you see a shadow beneath your boat, and some of you are paying attention, you go, oh, whoa, we better draw in those fishing lines and get those nets out. We're going to need a bigger boat. Something's beneath us, and this is way bigger than we thought when we came out here. And while we're talking about here, we got an agent over here, we got an agent way over there, and we got help that needs right here, and it needs to be there now, okay? We're gonna need a bigger boat. We need a bigger plan. I had a wonderful time getting to talk to Jaeson and Tom this morning about a plan that I've been working on developing over years, called the Blue Lease, or the Socorro Lease, which is actually a plan to do like a lease it to police it plan with Mexico for the front 26.2 miles of the Mexican border, which is also called the Frontera. For those of you that live on the border, you know what I'm talking about when I say the Frontera. That is the 50-kilometer line that used to be, we used to be able to go back and forth all the time to Mexico. It was a tourism bounty marker. Tourism could go up to 50K, 26.2 miles. You free passage, and it was also the commerce zone. And sadly, that commerce zone isn't such anymore. It has fallen into gross disrepair and decay. They don't have the tourism that they used to. They don't have the industry. The maquiladora plants have all been shut down because of the violence, the mafias, gang cartels, payday kidnappings, and all that. And it's actually for that reason that I met my wife, was from her father worked in the maquiladora plants in the early 90s before they had to start shutting them down because of the violence. And so the plan is to actually do a lease it to police it. The problem isn't that Mexico doesn't need industry. The problem is that they need help. The Mexican citizenry, you'd be surprised how many people down there feel the same way that we do about the violence that they're experiencing in their communities, but they have nowhere to turn. They have nowhere to turn somebody in that it won't come back on them, and their family starts disappearing. They live in fear right across this border. They live in fear, and they don't want their community like that. And the lease it to police it, the Socorro lease, it's an assistance lease, basically allows the United States to lease the policing of that front 26.2 miles. And it doesn't mean we're going to make a wall go higher and higher and higher. It means we make the wall go wider. And it's a wall of commerce, and it actually has numerous benefits. And so one of the things that I was very appreciative to have audience with Jaeson and Tom this morning with was to discuss some of those benefits that can happen with that, and with working with a community on the Mexican side, and actually working with their community on these commercial districts, and actually being allowed to having the ability to work in an enterprise rather than just trying to push people back behind a fence and treating it like this is our protection right here. I think we need to get a bigger boat. We need a better plan. We need something that's going to go beyond, oh, well, we have a different president now in office, and he's leaving the gates hanging wide open. But we built this great wall, and it's finished now, maybe let's say 2030. Hey, it's finished, but so what? Now we got this communist up here in the White House, and he doesn't care. The gate's hanging wide open, okay? So I think we can have a longer-term plan. It's kind of like a Panamanian lease that we did with the Panama Canal when we leased that. We actually policed the Panama Canal. We policed it, so nobody got near those locks or channels that wasn't supposed to be in that area. And the same thing goes for the Socorro lease, the blue lease. So anyways, I was asked to just introduce that to you guys and talk to you about it and let you know that we're working on some beyond the wall, that there's more to be done to help and to get this curtailed, but to also bring business back to Mexico, where they're not fighting to get over here for work, where we're bringing them work, and we're doing it once again. They were so excited. I remember the excitement in the 80s when they thought, man, we're going to be getting all this business and industry in Mexico, and it all dried up and went to China because of all the violence, and because China said, hey, we can do it for less. We can do it for less. And Mexico hated that. They despised it. But anyways, hey, God bless you guys. I love you, and thanks for coming out. Hey guys, let's give another round of applause to the people that came here to talk to us and for putting their lives on the line for us. We really appreciate y'all. You don't know what it means to know that we have people that have our backs in Washington, that have our backs and that are making waves, and not just saying, oh, well, we'll just leave those people living on the border. They should just move somewhere else. No, we shouldn't. This is our country. We don't move, we don't cut and run. This is our land, and we're going to fight for it. So God bless you, and thank you, you guys on the front lines. I know you're holding the line, and how we see you is not just a mama taking care of kids and dad over here taking care of kids. We see you with a whole level of respect, much higher than you belong on that. You really do. So God bless you guys, and God bless America.
And let you know that he did share that plan with me and Jaeson today, and I gave him commitment. He sent it to me by email a little while ago. So we're going to put some numbers around with the Heritage Foundation. Then I'm going to talk about that plan with our next president in 2024.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was incredible. Thank you, Alpine. Make sure you go americaproject.com and border911.com and follow us there. Thank you so much, Alpine.
And before we close, we want to introduce the president of the America Project real quick, and he wants to say a few things. So, Forrest, they're all yours for the next few minutes. Yes, sir. Thanks, Paul.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank our speakers. We've heard a lot today, a lot from our speakers, a lot from yourselves, and I want to let you know You know, Tom and all of our speakers have mentioned that we're going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting for this issue, and we're going to raise the awareness on this issue. Your being here is important. This entire event was live streamed to patriots as far-flung as New York. So the America Project is fighting for you, fighting for America, to represent you and your concerns, to raise this and force this into the national level of conversation. So right now, we have patriots in New York City at the America First warehouse watching this event. So we're gonna take a brief time out so our viewers on the web can see a snippet of the America First warehouse, and then I'll come back, all right? TV time out.
This is Joe the Box, and I'm John the Blanket. We're here at the America First warehouse getting ready to start America First, baby. We're ready to start the America Project Border 911 because we want the border shut down. Close it down. Close it down. Killing our children. He's angry. Very. Like Tom Homan, Jaeson Jones, Victor Avila. God bless you guys. America First, God bless. Close the border.
Guys, if we could, I would like to offer a round of applause, please, to Joe the Box and the patriots in New York who care about Alpine, Texas. I would like to thank you on behalf of the America Project. I would like to thank the fine residents of Texas who've welcomed their arms, welcomed this conversation. We will continue to fight for you, and most importantly, I would like to thank the Boy Scouts and the Color Guard today that remind us what this is really about, the next generation, that we're all going to fight for together. I ask that you join us at americaproject.com. Stay tuned, stay a part of this movement. We are here for you. Thank you very much. My name is Forrest McLean. Thank you, Alpine, Texas.
With these lawsuits, there are many of them. What you're going to see is the faces of these lawsuits, which is the most important thing. These are American citizens like me, like you.
Replacing fences every day. Their homes broken into, cars stolen, cattle missing, finding dead bodies on their property every day. Well, they've had enough.
The Patrick Byrne of the America Project is, I kind of thought it looked to me like Civic 101. It looked to me like what I learned in 8th grade American citizens are supposed to do.
And we're pro-life, we're pro-God, we're pro-family, everything that the left does not stand for.
And this administration not only refuses to, but in fact is siding with the opposition, with cartels.
Seen death my entire career.
This is a plan to accelerate illegal immigration, and they even admit it.
And so what's happening right here impacts all Americans.
By a trafficker with a larger group, probably because they couldn't keep up. What's disturbing is, it's 30 degrees out here. They got no food, no water, minimal clothes, and imagine the resources it takes that we spent today trying to find a group of two, with 2 helicopters and our partners in the United States Border Patrol.